Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
A special session is being held on Thursday, July 13th, 5 o'clock p.m., 5th floor conference room for a budget workshop. Roll call. Mugia. Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Philbrook. Bynum.
Here.
Walker. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Holland.
I'm sorry. Here.
Get my exercise.
Thank you. All right, so we are ready for our budget workshop. We're going to dive right in. We have a lot of material on tonight, and we want to click through it. So I'm going to turn it over to Administrator Bach to get us started.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just proceed to kind of run through the agenda if we can move that slide. So as the Mayor said, we have several items on tonight's agenda. The big emphasis for this evening is really to start by talking about the areas where we are expending a fair amount of money, and that's money that was directed from last year when we initiated some new money into that, and then they were continuing with a lot of funding in these areas this year. So that's in the area of what we're doing with our SOAR, or the blight elimination, beautification of our community, and demolition. So we will have a presentation to go through that area, show where we're going in that. We'll also talk about streets and sidewalks, which is another area where we've initiated several things within our community. It's one, as we all know, was top of the survey list of an area where we needed to spend money to do more in our community. So we want to make sure it's clear what we're planning to do the upcoming year. The Kaw River Levee is more of an update to tell you what's going on there, and then a lot of that's future about what will be going on within that area. And the next one is we stayed with our theme of where we're at with more of infrastructure projects. So there was a request to talk about funding in the Fairfax area. And then also we want to talk about, we have a couple items that are directly related to where we are with the Parks Master Plan. So we have those teed up for later on tonight. So with that, unless there's any questions on the agenda, I will proceed to our first group and we'll get started. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Assistant County Administrator Melissa Munt and her team, and they're going to take us through this part of the presentation. Melissa?
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Once again, we're here for another quarterly update on our SOAR project, which, as you'll recall, has a major emphasis on the quality of life in Wyandotte County. This quarter, we're going to talk to you about what we've done to help enhance the appearance, safety, and communication, once again, of our government with our residents and businesses. What we're hoping to show you is that we have quite an emphasis this last quarter on communication and also continued operational enhancements. So we're going to dive in. So this slide is a little bit of a change from the first time you would have seen it back in January when we announced our 10,000 properties. And what we wanted to do was give you a rough estimate of what we believe we've touched to date. And this is rough. There's some data that's not included, but it was what we were able to get our hands on to share with you. Remember, our overarching goal was 10,000 individual improvements to properties by the end of 2021. We know to date that we can quantify, based on what we told you we were counting, that we have touched 727. What am I doing wrong? Oh, it's too close? Okay. That we've hit 727 improvements so far, and there are more that we are just not able to report on easily, but we will be updating those numbers to get to the end of this year and give a bigger number to you. In the area of the land bank, we told you those numbers were going to go up, and due to transitions with our tax sale processes, you have seen an increase there from 2,400 up to almost 2,500, and 33 of those now have structures on them. Other note is that our demo list has grown. That's also a result of bringing more items into our land bank. We went from 188 to 201 there as of today. And then we also have completed the transition of 698 properties through the tax sale, either into a new owner or into the land bank. And the one item to note here on our safety slide is that we have developed a program for managing our vacant properties that are privately held. But what you'll see throughout this is that we have more work to do in that area. And a lot of these will be reported back to you on our successes with our resident survey that's budgeted for 2018. And we look to be able to give you some great results in March or April when we receive that information back. So let's start with our favorite one that we used to get lots of calls on and aren't now. Let's talk about mowing. So we have a slide, I think, that kind of does a pretty good job of showing then and now. When we're mowing now, we're not doing what was on the top, and I think that's great testament to the work of our staff. What I will tell you is that our Parks and Rec Department, in coordination with Public Works, has transitioned what was a 56-day cycle in 2016 down to a 21-day cycle for abatements in conjunction with NRC. This is a goal that we had of 16 days, but we feel that this is massive improvement in just one short year. And staff is working on a high amount of overtime to keep this up, and we've requested through the budget for another $200,000 to get through the end of the year, because our funds for mowing do run out in the end of this month if we don't receive further funding through the budget process. I'm going to go ahead and skip over this slide, but it is talking more about some of the other initiatives that we had, but we have a lot of slides, and these are for you to look back at later. So here's another exciting development as part of our SOAR program this year. We've actually looked at implementing strategic enforcement of codes. We actually went ahead with this one ahead of resolutions-based codes because we had the data from the KU study that we shared with you, looking at our tipping point neighborhoods, and those are identified here as census tracts. And what we've done is worked in coordination with Greg Talkins' group at NRC, and they've adopted these areas for a more intense focus, strategic focus, and are also just now starting proactive enforcement of our arterials and collectors. This is all very recent, so if you haven't noticed a change, it's all occurred within the last week or so, and we're really excited to see what happens there. As part of this change, we're actually transitioning our code enforcement zones slightly to help create better focus with some of the extra staff that the commission's approved over the last couple of years. So in the upper right-hand corner is the current code areas. And what you'll see down below is we're actually creating a new one single code enforcement officer in and around the Wyandotte County Lake area. And in red also towards the upper middle part of the slide, we're actually doing a more intensive work around the 435 corridor between Leavenworth Road and State. And that
brings us to our vacant structures, which continue to be our single biggest hazard. They present not just a safety hazard, but they also present a hazard to the value of every house you can see from that vacant structure. We have made progress on these. But we are not where we hope to be. Our single biggest bottleneck here is that we have our registry that we now have the ordinance support for requires us to have a CELA in a condition where we can actually register our properties. That is running behind like everything we have to do with the CELA, so we are moving that into the next quarter. It'll probably be the end of the year before we actually are in a position to register parcels to register the vacant properties in the system.
What did you say was behind? I didn't understand the word.
Maui or Acela are
Okay.
our
computer
software.
system. Okay.
Greg tells me that he has found some workarounds. We may be able to start up in advance of when Acela is actually ready, and we do have a field trip planned to go visit Omaha where they are doing a registry using Acela. So we are making progress. We're just not where we would like to have been by now, but we knew there would be hiccups. Our vacants present a big challenge to us. We know that we have thousands of vacant parcels out there. They present a boarding problem. We have expended more than half of our $28,000 budget for boarding. We have boarded 73 houses with that. We have $13,000 left. That'll probably get us through September on our boarding. But at that rate, we'll have boarded up something just short of 150 houses, which is possibly, if you look at our number of unfits, just as a gauge of what we probably should be boarding, 10% of the overall problem. And speaking of unfits, we continue to wrestle with that. We have adopted some procedural changes. We're discussing other issues, but no real substantive change in this area yet. We are working on it. It is one of our biggest areas to make a significant change, but it also ties to our vacancy registry. It also feeds into our demo list. With our proposed budget adjustments to demo list, it gives us just over $1 million for demolition. That covers just about 100 in the neighborhood of 100 houses a year. At our current rate, given what we've taken in just on our former referral sources, and then we add in what we're getting by picking up houses through the land bank that we then do the assessment on and determine are demo worthy, we're going to start pulling ahead by just through those two processes by about 25 houses per year. So at the end of our 5-year SOAR cycle, that's going to leave us with a little more than double what we have now on our demo list as opposed to no demo list. Of course, that's just what we're getting on the demo list that we're filing. When we estimate based on the vacancies and the rate at which we are reviewing houses when they come into the land bank, we can estimate that somewhere more than half of what's out there vacant is probably demo worthy. So we're really probably looking at a much higher number for those demolition requirements. We are still working on transitioning the land bank to an interactive map that will give you the real-time data on what's available in the land bank, which will help us get things out of the land bank. Still happening, but as part of the transparency in SOAR, we're not just talking about what gets done. We're talking about what we're working on and the challenges we run into.
So this next slide will go over the process improvements made by the Delinquent Real Estate Department and the tax sale.
Let me stop you right there. If anybody who doesn't know, this is Maddie Waldeck, our new manager for delinquent real estate. We have never had a manager in delinquent real estate. We anticipate that as one of the efficiencies in our process, that this will make our process run a lot more smoothly and robustly. We are delighted to have gotten her from Treasury.
Thank you. And you'll see that I like a lot of graphics and cheesy clip art. So this will show you just a quick overview of some of the process improvements that have been made. We have an attorney review all of the paperwork before we file to make sure that we have an ironclad case against that. So we limit the amount of parcels that need to be removed from the tax sale. We now accept partial payments, so when somebody comes in and says, I don't quite have half, we don't send them away to go get the other half. We collect their money and say, come back when you have the rest. We have a checklist to ensure efficiency. We challenge successive payment plans, so if a customer has been in a payment plan before, we make sure to let the judge know that so that they have that information before making a determination with what to do with that parcel. We've increased the goal expectations. We have a VISTA intern, which is really helpful in the department, and we have the perpetual bidder list. So we used to require everybody to register every time we have a tax sale. Now, once they're registered in perpetuity unless they make an infraction, of course, but they keep their same bidder number. That way, they don't have to come back every time. So we calculated what it costs per parcel to put a parcel in the tax sale, and this is just a rough estimate. It's going to tell you what ballpark to be in. It's not going to tell you what row and what seat to sit in. We calculated this by the operating expenses by the delinquent real estate and a percentage of other departments that assist in the tax sale process. So in 2016, we sent 1,141 total parcels, served them with paperwork. So we estimate that cost to be $562 per parcel. In 2017, we expect to almost double that, which would, of course, decrease the cost per parcel just by increasing efficiencies. So when we increase the efficiencies, we severely decrease the cost. And this is an overview of the payment plans. And currently, we're reevaluating the process that once somebody they failed on the payment plan, they're immediately referred to our abstractors to be able to be put back in the tax sale.
All right, quickly we'll run through this. We also had some information that we wanted to work on with our landlords and renters program. We are actually trying to figure out how if a property has fire damage and they want to get another rental license on another property and they haven't fixed it, because we see this kind of, they need their revenue generation, so they go find another cheap property to get that revenue flowing back in again. We are reviewing, but we believe this is home rule authority, and we can actually make our own change there to not have to provide a landlord with another rental license for another property until they either repair or remove the other one that's been damaged, which is great news to hear. We're also working on our coordination, just defining that between livable neighborhoods, rental licensing, and human services, and there's some great work that's already happening and more that's underway. From an infrastructure standpoint, we'll be covering a lot more of this later tonight, but just want to let you know that a team was formed last summer, knowing that sidewalks and trails were critical, part of the residential survey that we did, and these are some of our successes. We've analyzed the plan. We're developing a public information program about the 50/50 sidewalk, and on the trail side, we've partnered with the 2020 movement, and also KCMO on other projects, as well as we're seeking long-term agreements with Cow Valley, and also a $100,000 grant from the Sunflower Foundation to complete the surfacing on the phase 1 of the Cow Valley Levee Trail. Trying to make sure I don't skip. Community development, you're aware that we received the lead-based paint grant, so won't spend any more time on that. We also just want to share some successes from our home repair program. 24 homes so far this year have received new furnaces, electrical, plumbing, water lines, sewers, or some combination thereof. and 3 homes have been assisted with ADA improvements, and 2 total loans have been done out of our down payment assistance program. We also are moving forward with our NRSA program, and I want to thank Commissioner Bynum and Johnson for being at the different meetings that we've had on this, and we're going to be submitting our plan to HUD on or before September 29th this year, and we had a round of successful meetings on that again yesterday. So lots of work going on in that area. Also, update on the Northeast Master Plan. For those of you who are wondering what happened, we are in final negotiations with the consultant and hope to be kicking off the project in August. You're next, right?
In our ongoing mowing and landscaping, everyone's most favorite and exciting topic, we have made significant progress in efficiencies. We are, again, not as far as we would like to be. We hope by this point to have Lucidity driving everything we do. We have the GIS software out there helping us coordinate our effort, but we are not as far along as we want that to be. We want one master system that drives all of the aspects of the mowing. Right now, we're still having to do some of it by hand. We expect that by the end of the year, we will be all set for next year's mowing season and hit that even more efficiently. In the Parks Department, we have in process the hires on horticulturalists, which improve our beautification and our tree maintenance issues. And our exciting weed spraying process has become more efficient than it has been in the past. We're spraying things we've never bothered to spray before, and it's making the ongoing maintenance a lot easier to keep up with. We are still working on developing our communication system on our events in our parks, but that is promising and moving forward.
All right, so animal services is a critical component of the SOAR program, as you are all aware. And right now, they're working on analysis of the best way to utilize volunteers. We were hoping to have this done, but we had some staff transition that's slowed a few of these things up. We have implemented some new animal services policies. These are internal, which could get more detail if anyone's interested. And additionally, just as an update, we did select an architectural firm to do our animal services facility analysis, and that should be starting later this summer. Also, my favorite thing, and it's a joke among staff, but packs of wild dogs. We are actually trying to figure out how to handle that. We've conducted some staff training now on how to capture these animals. And then the next challenge is figuring out how to coordinate with other departments, how to better get these reported with residents, and how to get a hold of them sooner before they hurt somebody.
She had to talk about the dogs.
Okay, I'll turn my microphone on. Thank you. This being a budget workshop, are we leading this somewhere towards budget?
Yes.
Is this just FYI about how well or not well SOAR's doing? Do they need more money? They want more money in certain areas? I mean, do we have a conclusion to this that will actually be talking about the budget?
Well, the budgetary aspect is that we have directed a lot of money toward this area.
I agree.
So that's why it's on here to show this is where we're spending. So new money that was put in the budget last year was directed toward this effort for this year, and then I'm continuing to direct it in that direction going forward. There is some discussion about putting more money toward demolition, and I think that is one item that there may be some discussion on.
Okay.
The overall, no, the overall is just to show you this is where it's going. So.
You know, okay. Okay. I would prefer not to spend the time on budget workshops going over what's been accomplished in every department. This is me personally. If we're here to talk about the needs for more money, then of course we need to understand that. Or if we're going to take money away. you know, we can have a special session on SOAR and what they've accomplished and not, or the police department or the fire department.
Okay. I mean, it's your workshop, so.
Well,
we can take
I'm
it how
only
you wanna
one.
do it.
I mean, it just seems like if we're gonna get to the issue, if the issue is they need more money for demolition, why aren't we talking about that?
Well, I think as this came forward, this is one of the largest new initiatives this commission has undertaken. I mean, we put $1.7 million into this program with the Star Bonds money, and it's one of our highest priorities in terms of how we're spending new money. And I think, and obviously they're clicking through it quickly. I mean, they're not dwelling on any slides, but there's a lot of information here. So
I agree, it's important. I'm not at all opposed to putting more money towards these objectives, you know, demolition being one of the top priorities. I've had a house for 3 years I've been told is going to be taken down that year, and the house on Tenney is still standing. So I would love to see us put more money in demolition.
Well, I think if it's all right, let's finish this presentation, and then I think we can talk about what that means, because I think it has ramifications for public safety. I think it has ramifications for infrastructure. There's a lot of ramifications in this proposal, or in this presentation, so. All right. Let's continue, please.
The point is well taken. We're making several points on very financially based issues. The fact that the mowing money runs out at the end of this month, the fact that the boarding money will run out in September, that we're only touching a fraction of it. And we are also trying to show the efficiencies we're working on, because we are not just saying everything takes more money. So we're going to skip through many of the communication issues, even though communication is critical to us.
In fact, this is where our staff has spent a lot of time. The website, more work on the website, publications, citizens, e-news, Facebook, getting out and talking to people. I would really highly encourage you to please review this work that we're doing, because if we aren't communicating with the public, they don't know what we're doing. And at the end of the day, SOAR is more than just 1.6 million. It's staff time, and it's not quantifiable, because almost every department in some way is engaged in this. So from a fiscal perspective, it's where the rubber and the road for staff is at right now. That's where they're spending a bulk of their time.
Well, and I think the other piece that's important on that is if not for the work that's been done in staff time, we wouldn't be able to quantify the mowing. We wouldn't be able to quantify the boarding. We wouldn't be able to quantify the demolition. But for the time we've spent the last year, just getting our head around, we all know blight is a huge issue. What's huge mean? And I think we're starting to see the parameters of it come into shape as we continue to do this work. And I think that's one of the most important contributions right now, is to be able to quantify the scale and scope of what we're even talking about. Because you can ask any citizen in this community and they'll say, boy, the blight's terrible. Okay, I agree. How many vacant lots are we talking about? Well, there's about 6,000 vacant lots. How many abandoned structures? Over 4,000. We're starting to get a grasp on what the scale is, and then now we're getting realistic numbers about what it's going to take to overcome it. And so that's where I think the value comes in, not only for this budget in terms of the issues you've already raised, but in future budgets as well. So.
And it's precisely that ability to, for the first time, quantify what the actual cost is, what the unit cost is for each incremental step we go forward, that we are gathering data we've never had before. And this is our baseline year. This is what tells us what it really costs. If this is the level we want mowing at, this is what we're going to have to do to get to it. Now we have one more innovation piece coming up.
So this is the third quarter preview, and I'm back with the fun graphics. So coming soon to a code enforcement office near you is a resolutions-based code enforcement. And what that means is we're basically instead of taking a punitive approach and trying to ticket our way out of the problem, instead we're going to try to work with people and try to figure out the root of the problem so that we can help. So we can take a home that looks something like this and work together, and maybe it'll turn into something that looks like this.
Now, this is not just a warm, fuzzy, we can hug our way out of fixing a problem. The criminal process is still there. This is a process modeled on the improvements that Mobile, Alabama has demonstrated, where they were able to get more efficiency, more productivity, better results, and much higher community satisfaction with how they engage in their process. And what they did was take a deep dive with an internal team in studying how they run their code enforcement process now, find the efficiencies, much the way we have doubled our productivity in delinquent real estate by taking the time to map out the processes, look at how we do things, examine the culture, and see where we can find the efficiencies. We've cut $150,000 that we had moved into delinquent real estate that I anticipated we were going to need to contract externally to increase our production, because we've been able to increase that production internally through those improvements without having to spend that money. So we have found those efficiencies, and Greg is willing to work with us and let us work with him and bring in an internal team like Mobile has done and study what we do and make recommendations on how we do similar improvements to gain those same sort of efficiencies going forward, which is very exciting to us and to Maddie in particular,
Yes.
who has wanted to move to Mobile since she saw this demonstration.
That would be a violation of our residency requirement.
It would be.
And one heck of a commute.
Yes, one heck of a commute. Just real quick, some third quarter previews. We're going to be working with the Behavioral Insights team, or BIT, to formulate some letters that we're going to send to customers that are their first and second year delinquent, and also provide communication to the public about paying taxes and that you have to pay them annually and the consequences if you fail to do so. We're also going to continue to work on collecting data. Like they said, that this is our baseline data, so we're going to continue to do that. And then we're also going to continue operational improvements, such as developing standard operating procedures to abate graffiti.
With that, we will yield the floor. This also serves as our second quarter update for SOAR, because we were scheduled to be here in July to provide that, which is also the reason that Commissioner Walker had to listen to us tonight, because there was no other time in July. So we will be back the first part of October with our third quarter update, and we're hoping to see a lot less yellow. Yellow indicates underway or behind, and a lot more gray on our slides, which means it's completed and moving forward.
All right, I have several questions about demo. How many of our demolitions have recoverable costs? If we put a lien on a property, obviously if we demo someone else's property because it's hazardous, we put a lien on it. Do we have a, there's a seat right over here. There's a seat right there. Do we have, do we get any revenue back after a demo from insurance, from anything else?
My answer to that, Mayor, would be that most of the ones that we're aware that have insurance, we pay that demo out of insurance from the beginning. So we do get some funding through insurance proceeds to pay for demo. I would say that is probably less than 4% of the cost of overall demo that we do.
Less than 4%?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would say a majority of the costs that we spend for demo, we do not recover. I would have to say it's way up in the 90s.
And
occasionally, we will get some individual that comes forward and pay after the fact, but that is very rare.
I know some cities are actually, yes,
That continues on. We see that because most of these properties where we have demoed the house, that bill goes onto the tax bill, and it is still there when we take it through the tax sale. Fewer than a third of those that we put through the tax sale with the demo bill on it will be purchased directly by someone at the tax sale. They will end up needing to go through the land bank to remove that fee before we'll be able to find a buyer. So we are not recovering, if we're recovering a third of those costs through the tax sale process, it's a generous estimate.
I also know there are communities that are actually levying civil charges against property owners when crime is happening on these properties. Is there a path that we're looking at that in terms of filing civil charges against landowners who are negligent in allowing crime to happen on their properties?
We've actually had conversations with the police department. I think that one we would probably want to park until 2018, just as something to explore, but I think that's something we'd be more than happy to put on the list to do research and consider implementing for 2018. So I'll ask the police department.
All right. Go ahead.
May I comment on one, and it's kind of underway. There is one, it's not a demo, we hope, but we are looking at civil action with the police department on a motel complex that's within our community right now.
Okay. I'm concerned that I've asked for some numbers about demo, and I understand we take in about 72 a year, and we demo about 75 a year. So we're about even. We're about able with the current $700,000 in the budget. We're kind of holding even. We're taking down as many as come in. And the budget currently has $300,000 in it, additional money, which would take our demo from $700,000 up to $1 million, which would allow us to demo about 25 to 30 more properties per year. My concern is we have 200 properties on the demo list, and at our current funding rate in 18, if we just keep up with the demand, it would take us 7 years to get all those properties off of the demo list. So my question is there a way, it's with $300,000 extra dollars, it'll take us 7 years. My question is there any way we could, and this is an unpopular discussion, but debt finance the removal of those last 200 houses that are on the demo list and get rid of them, and use the $300,000 of additional money to pay that off over 10 years instead of doing it one little piece at a time and taking 7 years. My thinking about it is, what kind of dividends does it pay to the value of the neighborhoods? Never mind morale, just to get these 200 structures out of our neighborhoods. I mean, I've been walking around our neighborhoods, and there's some neighborhoods, there's a burnt out house between two houses. There's kids walking back and forth. We're going to spend money boarding them. They're irrecoverable. The fire department will tell you some of the house fires we have are the second or third time a structure's caught on fire. We've got to get these out of our neighborhoods. If we're, instead of taking the $300,000 that's already proposed in the administrator's budget and looking at that over 10 years and just burying all of these delinquents so that we can use the $500,000 starting next year or the following year to keep up, so that as they come in a year, we're taking them down that same year. We have no more than a 12-month wait, or hopefully less, or 30-day wait, however long it takes to demo a property. We can get them done immediately. I just want to ask about Mr. Bach, if you have any thoughts about what it would take to debt finance, getting rid of the 200 structures, getting caught up today, and using that $300,000 already contemplated in the budget to get it done now.
Well, one, it is a debt eligible type expense, so that is something we could do. I am probably not real keen on doing additional debt based on how much stuff we already have in debt, so I would really want to make sure we underline the fact that if we were going to add to that structure, that we dedicate a separate revenue flow outside of what we currently have dedicated to our debt funded area to pay for this. Now we'd make it happen, and that's from what I'm hearing, that's what you are proposing to make happen. So that is a possible scenario we could enter into. Kathleen, do you have any other thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, we spoke with our bond counsel, and it was determined that legally we are authorized to issue debt to pay for demolition costs. And, but I did do a little bit of research, and there are potentially opportunities, philanthropic or through federal grants, who could assist in paying for, you know, for demolition costs as well to eradicate blight. Of course, that means that, you know, we really need to dedicate some staff to go out and seek those grants and apply for them, and then manage and you know, maintain the reporting requirements. You know, but there are opportunities. There's a myriad of funding sources, and we know that there's some other fiscally distressed cities, you know, Detroit and elsewhere, Cleveland, where, you know, this is a common problem throughout the nation. So, but we could do it this way, and I think, you know, that's right. If we had a separate kind of funding source, such as a transfer in to the debt service fund for funds that we've already have budgeted, that would diminish the load on the mill that's supporting all of our existing debt.
So we could move the $300,000 into the debt service fund specifically to manage this particular piece of debt. Is that right?
And budget. Yes,
in the budget, yep. Okay, Commissioner.
And then just the caveat on the equation you threw out there, the numbers you were using are based on our historic numbers. Obviously, what's been presented by the SOAR team is one where we'll be adding more to our list, probably at a more rapid rate. But it doesn't mean they don't exist today. We just don't have them in our inventory of houses ready on the demolition list. So it's not like they're not out there. It's just we haven't prepped them to the point that they're on that list.
Well, we already have structures that are 7 years old on that list that have been sitting in the neighborhood due for demo for 7 years. Is that right?
That's right, Mayor.
Okay. Commissioner Walker and then Murguia.
A number of years ago, in my other life, I raised this issue with the then commission or some commissioners. You know, we still bid out these demolitions. And so, you know, like, we buy toilet paper in bulk because we get a better price. The same thing would be true in the demolition market. I have very strong reason to believe, that if we bid this out to demolition contractors, and we said we were going to do 125 or 150 a year, we would get a better per unit price than what we're doing now by handing them out to this guy, to that guy, to this guy. There would be efficiencies because then the contractor would have dedicated employees for that. I've never been able to get any traction with that because I don't want to call them mom and pop, but it obviously means that small demolition contractors are not going to get it if they don't win the bid on a per unit basis. To me, everything we do, we want the efficiency, so if we get a better discount in buying bulk, we do it. But when it comes to this, it's never, well, I don't know. It seems like an idea, and I have reason to believe, good reason to believe, that our per unit price would be less per unit, and I guess it would depend on the number of units we wanted to fund in a given year, but we could certainly fund more than, we would get more for our same money that we're knocking 75 down now than we would if we bid it out where a big contractor, medium-sized contractor, take on the cost of the crew and the employees and the equipment. The second thing is, I never have understood who and how it is determined the order of what gets demolished. Now, I can understand if you have an emergency with a fire and, you know, it's an attractive nuisance for children, but all these vacant houses are attractive nuisances for one reason or another, and it doesn't have to be children. But, you know, it seems very difficult if you've got a problem in a neighborhood, certainly from the commission viewpoint, to get that house knocked down. I've mentioned the one I've had. I've been told for 3 years it was coming down that year. And I do know they have cut the sewer off, and then the guys walked off and they've been gone for 2 months. Nobody ever came back. Why would you leave a job site that you were cutting the sewer on and not go ahead and demolish the property? So that's kind of my question of maybe we look at a financial aspect of it and whether that proves out to be true, that we could get, call it what it is, a bulk discount. We're going to give you all of it, and that's $1 million, and we want, how many houses are you willing to knock down for $100? Or is it 100? Is it 150? I mean, you all get it. I mean, we're talking about government money here, taxpayer money. We're not talking about pork that we're going to hand out all over the community to this one and that one just so they got a little piece of the action. So that's how I see it.
Commissioner Murguia?
Thank you, Mayor. Doug, can you tell me how many contractors do we subcontract mowing with across the city? Do you have any idea?
I don't know if 6.
6.
That includes Parks and Rec. So who mows? I remember Public Works used to mow and the Parks Department used to mow, and now Parks and Rec is under Public Works. So how many departments in the unified government mow?
Parks is still its own department outside of it. And we've moved the mowing into the Parks Department for operations. I have Jack Webb, who's in charge of our mowing operations now. He could probably speak in more detail if you want to try to. Is there some?
So is the only department within the unified government that mows right now Parks and Rec?
Jack, do you want to speak to that, or Jeff?
No, street department still mows too. They mow right-of-ways.
Okay. And so how much of our, somebody said 6, how much of our mowing is done in-house, and is 6 the number that we subcontract with this year, or is that every year, or how does that work?
We have 6 contractors. They mow medians of some parks, vacant lots, ball fields.
So you said you're speaking from Parks and Rec, right? Do you know how many subcontractors the Public Works or Streets hires to do mowing?
We put all that in Parks and Rec this year.
So all the mowing is through Parks and Rec?
Yeah,
yes, except some right-of-ways.
Okay, so all contract mowing is through Parks and Rec?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, essentially, the broad spectrum of the mowing we do is done by Parks and Rec, and it's under their umbrella. Streets has some of their right-of-ways they're doing. Building and Logistics will do some of theirs around their buildings. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, Parks generally has all this mowing.
Okay.
Either by contract or by employees.
Okay. And can I get a copy of who the current contractors are and the location of their business? Sure. Okay. Then I just had a question in regard to the grant funds you were referencing. You mentioned that there were grant funds available for demolition, but it would require staff to work on them. Are those grant funds only eligible for cities to apply for?
Well, I did some preliminary research, and I've read anecdotally that there are funds. I can't be specific about it. I just know that there's monies out there that potentially could be available. So I'm sure there's a myriad of entities that could apply.
Can you send me that link or whatever articles I've referenced that there are grant funds that are out there for mowing?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Clarify, that was demolition, not mowing.
I'm sorry, demolition.
Okay.
I apologize. Yep, that's correct. That's what I meant, for demolition.
That's what I thought. Okay.
All right, we have Commissioners McKiernan, Kane, and then Walters. Commissioner McKiernan? Do you want it?
So in regard to the concept of borrowing for demo, as attractive as it is to accelerate the pace at which we are demoing houses, and I have a most impressive list in my district that need to come down, check my rough math on this. We borrow $3 million for 20 years, we pay back $4 million. roughly. So I wonder, is it worth that extra investment of $1 million over the course of paying back that loan? Do we get bang for our buck? Is tearing them all down soon? Could we instead continue on a cash basis as we are, look for the efficiencies, look for the grants, come back in a year's time, see what progress we've made, if any? Because frankly, I think we just need to hold on to as much cash as we can and not pay it back in financing charges for, I don't know, at this moment in time, I don't know that I see the benefit of bonding that for the acceleration of the timetable to get them all down. But I will say that what this points out is the critical importance of SOAR and all of the anti-blight initiatives, because as we talked the other day, we need to grow our tax base, we need to grow our assessed value, but part of that growing is making sure that the environment is fertile for things to grow in, and making sure that what we have doesn't decay to the point of needing to be demolished. So I think, going back to our earlier comment about, having this come to a budget workshop, I think it underscores the critical need for the budget money that we have put forward toward SOAR, toward anti-blight. I think we should continue to fund it, at least at the current level, if not look for ways that we can find it additionally, because I think it's critical to growing our tax base that we don't let things rot out from under us. But in terms of borrowing, it's a very attractive idea, and I'm still thinking about that.
I would like to add that I did a little bit more research, and I found that, there are studies that really demonstrate that there's a return on investment by accelerating the demolition program that could, marginally overcome the borrowing costs. So, it's really difficult it's just a policy decision on your part.
Could you send that information? Just one, I'm sorry for jumping in.
No, you're okay.
For that.
I would love it.
Commissioner Kane and then Walters.
Mayor, I think it's a good idea. I just don't think we have the money, and I'm kind of like Commissioner McKiernan. I don't know if I want to pay $1 million, but I would like a lot more information before we make such a big decision like this.
Okay. Commissioner Walters.
So I'd like to comment about the concept of borrowing also. So I'm looking at the 2017 original budget and the 2017 amended budget. And the budget that we approved last year projected an ending fund balance of a little over $11 million. That was the county administrator's recommendation. That's what we all approved. Now the 2017 amended budget projects a $15 million end of year fund balance. So suddenly we found $4 million between the time we approved this last year and now. So I don't think we need to think about borrowing money. As Commissioner Johnson said last time, we've got these interrelated parts of mill levy and debt and money in the bank. So what is being proposed in the 2017 amended budget is we take that $4 million and we put it in the bank. So I would suggest that we could put a little bit less of that in the bank and put a little bit more of it in cash funding for things like demolition and not have to borrow. And I would think we could entertain a discussion about that.
Are there any caveats on the fund balance that we should know as we think about that? Because sometimes we get fund balance, sometimes we sell a one-time piece of property. We had that with the land sale from Cerner. It was an $8 million introduction, but we had places that we needed to spend it. So I didn't know if there was a caveat around this additional fund balance that we should be aware of.
I don't know that we have any caveats. If there are, Kathleen, point them out as we get into this. I mean, I'll just note, every year, I hope there's money that falls to the bottom line because we budgeted what our maximum expenditure would be. If I don't have the option to overexpend that, I have to underexpend it. So the Commissioner's point that we let money fall to the bottom, that can go to build in. I had to hit that point last year, or at least coming as I start to look ahead to 2017, because our original budget, we still ended up budgeting more expenses than we did in revenue in the general fund. corrected that with this proposed budget, you know, by changing some efficiencies and looking at the revenues and where we're at. So we actually come out, the expenditures this year are a little bit less. And I hope the end of the year we will expend less than what we currently have planned. We will expend less than what we currently have planned. As I look forward to 2018, the budgeted amount is right on the line. I'm not going to, you can do what you want to. You made that adjustment last year, and then it makes it a little tougher as we move forward. But when we initially go into a budget and plan to spend more money than we're bringing in, that's not good fiscal management as a way to do it. And I will do everything possible as I move through the year to make sure that doesn't happen, just by finding different efficiencies. But I like to at least try to go in planning that. And that's why it's done the way it is.
We have Commissioner Bynum and then Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Townsend.
A couple items. The question earlier about a bulk discount on demo. Is there staff available here tonight that has already looked into that and can tell us one way or the other if we've sought that out in the past, and is it viable?
A little bit on that, Commissioner. In years past, we used to do, I would say, bulk bidding for the most part down in chambers but I don't think we would bid them in 2 or 3 packages. And over time, we moved away from that because we've been bidding things out as they get ready. And we didn't always have 50 or 60 to throw together at one time. We also had a lot of locally grown contractors that seemed to put pressures in certain places and wanted to be involved in this process, as well as minority businesses and small businesses and women-owned businesses. And there was concerns that were passed around during that time when this was considered last time that it would they would not have that ability to bid this. So
there's kind of a pro and con.
Yeah. If we get to the point that we're doing a major emphasis at a one-time shot, I think it has some relevancy. I'm not saying it didn't before, but I think it makes it more relevant.
Okay. When we've had a couple of commissioners ask for data tonight, I think I've requested this in the past. Could you send that to all commissioners? When we ask for something to be sent, could we all receive it? Just a request in general. And then my last question on this item is, we're about midway through the first year of extra budgeted dollars for SOAR, and I'm just wondering at this midpoint, have we budgeted enough, not enough, the right amount? How is it shaking out? Or maybe you're always going to want more, I don't know.
Actually, the staff that work on SOAR hear me say, I want this through efficiency, not through money. There are items in here that were to add staff in animal services, particularly, and a few other areas. Those are ongoing costs. It's stuff the commission, from a policy perspective, is very interested in. Mowing is the one area when we started into this last summer, we didn't have a good handle on. I can say with more confidence that we have a pretty good handle on it now, but weather dependent, that can change. If it would have been hot and dried up by now, which it still has not dried up, you can ask the fine folks behind me here, we wouldn't maybe be asking for as much, but it hasn't dried up. We're also in our first year of spraying. So that being said, we need more money. Will we use it all next year? I can't tell you. It's weather dependent. What I can tell you from a boarding perspective, really like more dollars. Understand we can't get it. It's going to push us to look other ways, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes, necessity is the mother of all invention. So be happy to try to figure out what that looks like. And if we need to come back to you next year and go, golly gosh, gee, it's not working, we need to be able to make these secure, because we feel that goes back to the safety aspect in the community, and it also enhances appearance. So it does 2 things. From a demo perspective, we're here to do whatever the commission wants. We understand there's a massive backlog. We understand that we only have a basic understanding of what that list might look like if it was comprehensive. So we're not here to push that. I know Greg's got one staff member. He's probably better to answer that one. But from the rest of SOAR, we don't need anything. We just need to learn how to do it smarter and not work as hard. So.
Commissioner Johnson, Townsend, and Murguia.
Thank you. Did I hear someone say that we were going to need more money? We've almost used up all of our money for mowing, or did I just mishear that?
That's right. We have, but it's built into the budget that I forward to you. I've recommended an extra $200,000 in this year's mowing budget, and that's the same amount requested next in the 2018 budget. So as presented to you, we believe we'll have enough money to get through into the fall.
Okay, very good. Again, I think it's already been said, and Commissioner Walters has reemphasized what I spoke about on last week with regard to overall financial discussion. When you talk about adding debt financing, although I said before I'm not opposed to debt financing, I think it needs to be done as a part of a larger financial discussion, and I think that's the reason why I talked about having some type of dashboard presented on some level throughout the year so that we can kind of get a sense of how one thing affects the other. And so I will continue to push for that, and that needs to be, in my opinion, made as part of a more intellectual discussion versus, you know, there are so many needs that we have out there, and we could all go around the table and pick an area that we could find to either finance through debt or to pay off with cash. So I think if we can have a much more intellectual discussion about how one thing affects the other, fund balance being one of those and things of that nature, I think that would be a better, although slower process, but I think it would be better for us. One of the things I want to commend you all on is the fact that I'm seeing mowing more frequently. I'm seeing the houses being boarded up, and I appreciate that attention to that. I've spoken to the Parks and Rec department directly about this, but I wanted to make sure that we do emphasize quality of care. While I'm not suggesting that every property has to be manicured perfectly, but when you talk about we cut the grass, if there's grass growing over curbs, you know, we just need to make sure that, I think that what we do even with our vacant lots, it speaks to how the government speaks to the community in terms of how the government views the city. So if we're not paying attention to certain things, we got it cut, we've got numbers. I understand we're trying to get the number up to 10,000, we have goals, but we don't want to forsake the quality of care in terms of how we present that. And I do see some inconsistencies throughout my district. Some areas are done better than others, and that might be just based on the contractor. I don't know. But I think that if we are contracting with different companies, they need to understand that it's important from the city perspective that we give a consistent level of quality regardless of where it is. But since I'm on the east side of town, I gotta be a proponent for the east side of town to make sure that we're getting quality of care as well. So, thank you.
Commissioners Townsend, Murguia, and then Philbrook.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, first topic, mowing. I'll pick up on that. Commissioner Johnson asked about the growing period. I want to make sure, and I understand from the administrator, that we have enough currently in the budget to get us through the end of the growing season, to continue mowing the way we are now, right? What is the end of that growing season? Are we talking about the end of August? Are we talking about the end of October? Because we're having much warmer temperatures longer. So where I'm not getting the calls anywhere in the volume that I used to get 2 years ago, I've noticed that our seasons are lengthening. So the calls will resume if we don't have enough to get us at least through the end of October. So where will this money take us through? November would be even better.
Well, the answer to that is November.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I mean, if it keeps raining consistently, we'll probably run out of money. I mean, rainy and sun, that's like, I mean, these folks are, really hoping it lets up, right? But hopefully that'll get us through. We are banking on that getting us through November. They actually, this year, have changed how we're staffing up. But it's really hard because our seasonal or our youth that don't join us until June. So, we get a shot in the arm after we've already been going at it this year since March. I mean, we were ready to be geared up April 1, and by the middle of March, we were already into the thick of it. So we were recognizing those changes, and staff's trying to adjust. And Doug has been great working with those folks on trying to help them adapt and adjust to that. So.
Okay. Well, I also noticed, and it's been mentioned before, that there was a transition of how we use staff using Parks and Recs personnel so that we could start earlier and continue. So yesterday, I observed, and we're still using those tractors, which is great to cut the lots. I don't care if we were pulling, a horse and doing it, as long as they're being done, and they're being done so much more efficiently and better and more often. That's key. And then the good thing was that I saw a gentleman come by with the weed whacker. That's the kind of finishing that we were talking about and started with putting in a couple of years ago. So I didn't get a chance to send an email, but I know somewhere in here that person's supervisor is here. So I want to call him out for the job that he did, the good job that he did yesterday. And I talked to him. He didn't know who I was, and said, I really appreciate how you're keeping this, and seeing the city, and the other gentleman who was on the tractor riding. And he said, well, that's my job. That also went to the type of customer service that he was getting. So I want to make sure I called that person out. Next topic, demolition. Do we have currently 200 houses that are eligible for demolition? Is that the number, Mayor?
We have 205 structures on our demolition list now, and increasing. Well, hopefully we decrease it every day, but we increase it every day.
Okay.
Is that, Greg, is there a different update than that?
No, I think that's pretty on target.
Okay. And that's the number. We'll go with 200 that we're talking about trying to get rid of with one fell swoop. If there is any way we could do that, I would support that, fiscally, responsibly do that for a couple of reasons. One, that's the biggest opportunity to use the economies of scale that Commissioner Walker is talking about to get rid of them. Two, they've been around so long, we'll be here 3 or 4 years, or somebody will be here 3 or 4 years talking about some of these same houses. So you've got immediate impact. It's an immediate value to whatever it surrounds to take down those houses. Third or fourthly, it has to be, even though we haven't started it with the Northeast Master Plan, consistent with anything that we would do with that, because it increases the value, gets rid of the blight, and it has to be consistent with whatever we would want to see with that plan, come out of that plan with development, because we've cleared property that needs to be demolished. There's no question about that. Also, if we aggressively pursue the other boarding processes that you talked about, that number that we intake on average was at 72, 75. That number is going to grow, and we're just digging ourselves, continuing to dig ourselves in a hole. So I would like to see, for those reasons, our best stab at getting rid of those 200 and then moving forward. If we've got extra money that we could move reasonably cash, do it that way. I'm not sure over how long we're paying this $1 million that was mentioned in interest, but I've got to believe there are immediate benefits to taking this one fell swoop and getting rid of this. Thank you.
Commissioners Murguia and then Philbrook.
Melissa, earlier, did you say you wished you had more money for boarding material?
Yes, but I also said we'd find a way to make things work.
Yeah, I know that you said that, but I was just, I didn't know if I heard you correctly. And when you're referencing boarding material, are you talking about like plywood to go over windows and doors?
Yeah, we actually brought forward through the standing committees a whole new boarding process. Land Bank's employing that now. What that does is it makes the structure much harder to break into. Now, people get into them if they want, but this takes the more casual individual who gets in there and possibly starts a fire and ruins it for rehab, makes it harder. And that new process costs a little bit more money, but in addition to it, we would like to go back and revisit some of our structures where people have ripped stuff off and really start securing these for the future. So if it doesn't happen this year, that's fine. We'll figure it out and we can work on it next year. We want you to know that that's something we as the SOAR team see as a possible way of helping secure these structures and saving them for someone to possibly renovate. Because if they're getting into them in mass, like in Commissioner McKiernan's district and setting fires, it's because they're not secured.
Okay, thanks.
And they're harder to get into, they wouldn't do that.
Commissioner Philbrook.
So the relationship between the boarded buildings and the demo buildings, is there a correlation between that? How many of these buildings are we boarding up that are on the demolition list? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get a feel for this because we could save a heck of a lot of boarding if we could get rid of a whole bunch of those out there that they're having to board over and over again or whatever has to happen. So what is there a relationship? I mean, do you have a correlation?
I give you a brief bit of history. It used to be that we tried to push away from spending money to board if it was on the demo list, if at all possible. That mentality's changed. We're trying to make the neighborhood safer. So unless we're going to take that property down real quick, if it's a fire damaged structure that we're doing an emergency demo, we probably won't board it because it'll be coming down within a week or two. But we don't have a whole lot of those. So we are now pretty much boarding up any property that's on the demo that needs to be boarded.
So you would say, so most of the stuff that we're boarding up is on the demo list?
No, there are a lot of other properties we are boarding because it's also prevention mode. We're trying to board properties to keep them from getting on the demo list now too.
I guess I'm trying to get the correlation of how many of them are demo and how many are we trying to save, sort of thing. Any idea?
I don't have those numbers, Commissioner.
Okay. I would like to say that yes, and I'm going to repeat myself, that yes, I think we could save money in boarding if we could get rid of a lot of these blighted properties. And I know that unless you're living next to a blighted property or around a lot of it, it's easy to ignore it and push it off, you know, because it's not in your backyard, it's not next to you. But having owned property in the city on east side of 635, I would tell you that it matters a heck of a lot. And I know that I don't really like to go in debt financing, but if there's some way we can find a way to really get rid of these blighted properties, I think it's going to make a big difference in possibly bringing in other people to develop our community. And I know that our community is going to be a whole lot happier with us not having to look at that blighted piece of property next to them. You know, and if there's any way we can do that and do it fiscally responsibly, I would really like to see us look at that.
All right. So I think everyone's weighed in that wants to. I think there's a dividend in there of increased property values around the demoed properties that is a return on investment. And I do think there's a need that if you're going to sell your house, and I don't know why people do this, we all do it. The best our house has looked in years is the day before we sell it. You know, we paint it, we clean it up, we do all that stuff. I think the impact of having, instead of 7 years of a dwindling number of houses, 7 years of clean neighborhoods pays a dividend, it's worthwhile. So maybe we can do this, if there's some consensus here, to ask Mr. Bach and his staff to look at some options for eliminating these 200 and bring us some options forward that we can vote on. But to look at some different financial tools. The debt financing, for me, is a last-ditch effort. It's just a last-ditch effort, but if I lived next door to a house that was burned out, I'd want it down right now, and I hear that from neighbors all the time. It's not and I think Commissioner Philbrook said it well, if it's next door to your house, it's a crisis. If it's not next door to your house or it's around the corner and you can't see it from your front yard, then it's not too bad and you can live with it because you can't see it. So if there's if we can find some way to address this, an aggressive shot, maybe we can, I think there's enough consensus to at least look at that. And we don't need to make a decision on it today, but we can look at the options. Does that seem reasonable to everybody? Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else on SOAR and demo before we move to streets and sidewalks? Speaking of another area where we don't have enough money. We're just going from one to another.
That's it, rub it in.
Thank you all very much for your work. As they're changing seats, I just want to reflect on where we were 3 years ago with blight reduction and where we are today. Remarkable transformation.
We are going in the right direction, Mayor. The next one is really, there was a specific request by Commissioner McKernan on this one, but it was also one that I had on the list to come in and give a report because it's an area we're spending more money on. So where are we directing that money for 17 and 18 as we look to the future so the commission has a good understanding when they're out talking to the public, just where we are spending our streets and sidewalk money, what programs are in there, because we did initiate some new ones, and then open it up for any discussion or direction regarding the path we're moving for this. So if I may, I will turn this over to Jeff Fisher, our Director of Public Works, and let him lead us off.
Okay, thank you. I did want to quickly make an introduction, because I don't believe we've introduced Troy Shaw, our new county engineer back here, if you raise your hand.
I wonder.
Yes.
I thought, has he been around and I've just missed him? Welcome.
Yeah, he's actually been around. He's a former employee, and we got him back.
Yeah. All right. Great. So we're happy to have him on board, and he'll be available to answer some questions as needed. And then Director of Engineering, Brent Thompson, most of you know him. Brandon Grover is our new Asset Management Coordinator. He's really good at assembling these presentations and highlighting them for you, so he's going to do most of that. I did want to mention that you're going to see a little bit about street preservation tonight in his presentation. I did want to note that we're going to provide a presentation to you in September in greater detail about what a strong street preservation program looks like. So I'll hand it over to Brandon now.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioners, tonight we wanted to highlight a couple things about some initiatives we've added to the CMIP and also some increases we've made. We were presented with a really awesome task this year of not only getting a new director and having a new strategic plan laid out by you all, and really getting to interpret that and push that into better projects that meet the citizens' request and your strategic plan. One of the first things we like to highlight is one of the second question that was asked in the citizen survey, and that's the quality of maintenance and where people would like to see their money spent over the next few years. The overwhelming majority, 53%, compared to everything else on that list, was that they would like to see this spent on street improvements. This is a huge bonus for us because it's obviously something we're passionate about in the public works world, but we know it's something everyone else is passionate about as well.
I'd like to note that the people who put that as first choice it's more than any other topic, first, second, and third choice combined. So that's a significant chart. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. That's one of the key things we noticed about this the first time we saw it too. The second slide kind of gives you the same kind of information, and you've seen this one from us before, but we like to make sure that it really hits home. This is about the satisfaction The first number you see up here is the maintenance of city streets. So these would be like our major city streets, our arterials, collectors, things like that. 60% are neutral or dissatisfied with the current level of service that these streets receive, and 70% are neutral or dissatisfied with the maintenance of their neighborhood streets. This struck home really hard with us that we know we needed to figure out how to improve these in an effective manner. One of Jeff's big initiatives when he came in was introduction of the asset management ideology that we've adopted to better come up with a way to address these. So we're not just doing mill and overlay every 30 years, but coming up with a better practice of how we want to maintain our streets to get the most longevity out of them. One of the big things that we looked at was getting some new equipment to help us manage our streets better. You'll see in your budgets as you look over them, we're looking to buy 2 new pothole patchers. One we're actually waiting on for delivery in October, and one again next year. These will be 2 different types of machines. We highlighted them at a prior presentation. One will be a big batch plant machine that looks kind of similar to this dump truck down here. And the other one will be similar to this one up here, which is more of a front end rig. These will allow crews to go well into more towards freezing time, whereas our normal patching has to stop sometime around September, October, depending on weather. Another big piece of equipment we're looking to buy is a manhole saw. We showed you guys a video of that in one of our prior presentations, and I think everybody's looking forward to seeing that in action. And then we're also buying a paint striper that will allow us to do some of the more advanced painting technologies, epoxy and things like that, as opposed to just our water-based paint that tends to wear off a little more quickly. All of these implements will allow us to be more efficient in our time, and we're looking, especially with the pothole trucks and the patcher trucks, we're looking to be able to reassociate or reuse about $160,000 per crew on other initiatives throughout the city. Our main one we're going to try and focus on is sidewalks and curb repair. We're actually training some new staff and bringing in some staff to be more effective and specialized in those areas. We wanted to highlight a couple things. This top half of the slide you see here is the 2017 budget that we have. We broke it out based on project type as far as streets are concerned. So you see about 40% is spent on street reconstructions. This number seems a little large, but that's because we've got a large chunk for the Leavenworth Road reconstruction right now. But you can still see that we spend a very large amount on full reconstructions, a little bit less on actual resurfacing, and even less on repairs. And about the same as we spend on repairs, which would be your deep patches, things like that, is the same amount we're currently spending on sidewalks. And the majority of that comes with our ADA projects and with our safe routes to schools. So that doesn't really address the overall need of the network. It's just more in key areas. The 2018 budget down here on the lower corner is kind of what we've worked towards. We've reduced several of the areas, increased our street resurfacing budget, increased our repairs, and also drastically increased our sidewalk budget. There's a couple key pieces you'll see, the sidewalk gap program, and some other initiatives that we're looking to increase those areas. This slide indicates what we're hoping to do, hopefully. As you can see, there's a large chunk here in the same color, even though it's broken up into several wedges. This is what we will be calling our street preservation. You'll see that item start showing up in the CIP in future years. That's because there's several different methods for street preservation, that we've lined out. Crack seal, surface treatments, resurfacing, and rehabilitation. We all consider those part of preservation. That way we're not looking at complete rebuilds as often as we would in a much smaller portion. We've also increased the larger portion of our curbs and sidewalks, as I mentioned, through several other initiatives. Some that were highlighted in the SOAR presentation about our 50/50 program, the sidewalk and sidewalk gap program, and our trails network improvements as well. A couple of the newer or larger projects you'll see in your CIP as you're going through it. The Upper Holiday Drive study and engineering. As everybody knows, there's a section of Holiday Drive over the old inland mines that has failed. So we're looking at potential options for what we can do for that section. Commissioner Walker, I know you're very passionate about several different options, so we're looking at those. the parallel parkway rehabilitation from 81st to 91st. That includes, a majority of that is resurfacing, but there is also several curb and sidewalk repairs in that area that we'll be addressing as well. Maybe some sidewalk extensions to hopefully complete some gaps in that area that will move people from the new Y along up to 90th to connect to the new soccer fields, and potentially even further on in the future to the new training facility and up to the Legends. The Holiday Drive bridge replacements, we highlighted this in several other presentations, but we found the need to really get in and address these 4 bridges that are out there. They're not in critical issues of failure necessarily. The bridges are still structurally sound. There's just some other issues we need to address.
And I just wanted to interrupt. I think maybe some people that were watching at home, last time we talked about CMIP, there was a little confusion about the Holiday Drive part that failed versus the bridge replacement. So those are 2 separate projects, not related. Just want to say that out loud for anyone who's watching at home this time who might have felt some of that confusion. It's unusual to see Holiday Drive come up in 2 places. It's kind of a rural area out there, so to see it come up twice in one CMIP is maybe a little bit unusual, but I had someone ask me, so are they going to put a bridge over the place where it failed? And I said, no. They're 2 separate projects, just happen to be on the same road, so.
That's an interesting option. Thanks for bringing that, Commissioner.
So maybe the bridge will be the ultimate solution, huh?
There's a potential.
Just lump it all under the bridges.
We've received several comments that some work needs to be done around the lake. And we agree. This year, there is some dedicated money that we're going to go in and do some deep patching and also some surface treatments while we evaluate potential further needs of the lake and the park and our other parks as well. You'll see those budget items come up over the course of the CIP. Everybody's familiar with the Leavenworth Road improvements. Phase 1, we're currently underway with the utility work, so you'll see people out there. We're actually going to be doing a presentation about the website that citizens will be able to go to and see live updates and things like that for it. In Phase 2, utility work should begin sometime in late 2019 with construction starting in 2020. And finally, we want to let everybody know that we are still planning to do Hutton Road this year. It hasn't been bumped from the CIP as of yet. This will be the 2nd phase of the reconstruction from Cleveland almost up to the intersection with Leavenworth Road. This will be adding curb, gutter, sidewalks, drainage system, and
Commissioner Kane, do you want to jump in?
Thank you. So we're going to stop right before Leavenworth Road.
That's correct. We're looking at other potential options for the intersection itself. We haven't decided on one yet.
That's a good answer.
Are we waiting to plan how that roundabout's going to work?
Yeah,
That's a terrible answer.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Before we get too far removed from this, I've had constituents who were interested with the Leavenworth Road improvements about the completion date. So Phase 1, what would be at this point in time the best estimated completion? Spring of 2020 for Phase 1. And then in Phase 2.
No. We're not. We haven't gotten far enough in that one to know for sure, but it's probably, Phase 1 was a 2-year construction timeline. Phase 2 will probably be a little shorter just because it's a shorter project. So I think, what we say, 2020 was the bid for that, so I would guess it'll take a year and a half-ish.
Okay. Thank you. And then Mr. Grover mentioned that citizens could look at the website for construction updates. Are you talking about the UG's website, or will there be a separate one for this project?
There will actually be a separate website for the Leavenworth Road project. That's one of the new initiatives we've decided to embark on, is taking several key projects and developing personalized websites for those projects. That way citizens can get a more in-depth look at the project. We're working on getting that up and running. It should be as a link on the UG's website, as well as on potentially some signs that are going to be out there along the project corridor. And we're hoping to have that up within the month.
Yeah, I think
probably within the month.
And we're making presentation on that on the 24th.
Yeah.
Okay.
The commission.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
One of the other big pieces that we've really looked at this year is completing some sidewalk gaps and improving our sidewalk network. As the bike and pedestrian population in our community grows, we want to make sure they have the facilities that are meeting their needs. We presented I believe it was in March or May, a sidewalk gap program that was put together by the Planning and Zoning Commission and Planning and Zoning Department, and we have taken over the implementation of that. Part of that will be starting in late 2018 with the evaluation of our 2012 master plan, Sidewalk and Trails master plan, to assess those areas that we can get the best bang for our buck. And also, as Commissioner Murguia requested, we're looking at putting some more money into that program as time goes on. That kind of leads us into the overall sidewalk improvement projects, which are something we're hoping to initiate in twofold. One will be actually a rate project where we bid out all of our curbs, sidewalks, ADAs for the larger areas. And the second fold of that will be using our internal staff to repair some of the smaller areas and neighborhoods that just one piece of curbs broke out or something like that. As everybody's aware, the ADA ramp replacement projects, as a part of our Department of Justice consent decree, we have to continue on with those. At our current funding level, we're not quite ready to meet our consent decree, but we're working on that.
Commissioner Murguia.
Thank you, Mayor. On the requirement to become, put in the ADA ramps, can I see a list of how you're doing that? Because I've been up here for over 10 years now, and I've been waiting. I don't know about Commissioner Markley, I share this area with her, but Strong Avenue still doesn't have any ADA ramps on it. And that's a perfect example of where the sidewalk for the age of it is in relatively decent shape, from about 30th Street to 42nd. Relatively, there are spots that, you know, like what you're talking about, that could be redone that are small, but there are no handicap ramps, and there is an enormous amount of foot traffic in that area walking to and from the two new grocery stores, many of which people are handicapped. They're riding those little handicap scooter things. So I just want to know where it's at on the list so I can tell people. Yeah, Mr.
Yeah, I can give you a quick, from my history.
Troy,
with
I think you need to come down, Mike.
Microphone.
Answer.
I can give you a quick rundown from my history with the ADA ramp program. Basically, the consent decree stemmed from the resurfacing programs we did from '92 up to whenever the consent decree started. It was federal, or 2010. It was federal regulation that we install ADA ramps on any roads that were resurfaced or milled and overlaid. That was considered a treatment that made it necessary to put the ramps in. It wasn't being done, so the consent decree was issued. And basically how we're selecting, a GBA did a study, consulting firm, just noting all the areas that we did those overlays in over that time period. And then we're just systematically moving through. If there's an area that was in that area that you would like to address sooner than another one, let us know. I can go check that area. I can do that tomorrow and see if that area was in that for sure. And that's kind of how we're selecting the areas. It's just the areas that were overlaid in that time period. And if Strong Avenue was overlaid, then that could be one we could select. There's really we're just kind of systematically moving through, trying to knock out take the biggest bang for the buck as we can in different areas. So.
Well, it's always been a big issue, but it's been a significant issue in the last 3 years since the Walmart's been built and the Save-A-Lot's been built, because like I said, a lot of people in my district don't have transportation, and a large number, I live right on Strong Avenue also, so I get to see the foot traffic, and it's usually not by foot, it's by like wheelchair or some sort of scooter device. So yeah, if you could look at that area, that'd be great.
I'll do that tomorrow. That won't be an issue. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Philbrook.
So this is around curbs and sidewalks, and this isn't particularly at you. This is in combination with you, because I've had several complaints lately about when we go in and do a demolition, that curb or sidewalks are getting totally annihilated, but they're not being put back, okay? And or if they do a curb, they're doing it with asphalt, And I don't believe that that is acceptable, okay? Because asphalt is not a good curbing. And so I would like for us to pay a little bit closer attention to that, because if we're actually going to spend the money to do the demo, to make our area look better, that we pay attention to the curb and sidewalk. And I do believe that the demolition company that's doing this is responsible for putting things back the way it's supposed to be. And that's all I have to say.
So when they're a demo of a home,
Yeah.
that's damaging the curb.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
when
saying?
they're doing the demo work.
That's what I wanted to be clear on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Murguia?
I just want to piggyback off Commissioner Philbrook's comment. I'd go one step further. If our ultimate goal is to grow our community and to market these vacant lots that we're demolishing structures on, I would tell you, Commissioner Philbrook, I'm up close and personal with what gets demolished in my district, and a lot of times the curb and the sidewalk was bad to begin with. It's not necessarily the demolition crew that's tearing it up, but that vibration that takes place when they're knocking a building down just makes it worse, and there's really no way to protect that. So I would say, I know that we don't have a lot of money, but if we're going to market, especially some that are in strategic locations, some lots where we're doing some demolition, that we need to replace that curb and sidewalk so that we can actually, as I've said many times, I'd like to see signs in these lots that we have in our land bank that are for sale, that we could put in there and be proud to say that. So if we could link up, where's Melissa? There. So if we can link up, so I'll just walk through like a scenario that I know happens frequently in my district. So you demolish the structure, the houses around it are in relatively decent shape. I think that it's a prime spot to put new curb and sidewalk and to make sure it gets mowed regularly and to have a sign in the yard that says it's for sale. Call whatever number, at the UG for UG Land Bank. There are some spots that are more viable. I recognize there are some spots too that may not have as much marketability. And I would just like to share this. I'm not trying to be funny. I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but I will. So the agency I run does a lot of free mowing for the unified government and large parcels of ground. And we use volunteers and commercial mowers for that. But one of the things that, and this might be for the commission's opinion, in those large areas that aren't as high profile or that are too large to mow on a regular basis, you can do some creative things to them, such as putting a frame around them and letting the grass grow in the center where you're pushing them back, pushing the grass back from the street corners where traffic would be obstructed by the view of really tall grass. It looks very nice. I know that they do it in Johnson County on some of their highway easements. It looks very nice, and it can be done very well. And that kind of lends it to what Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Townsend were talking about, the details. If you don't mow the whole thing, but you mow the edge of it, and you take some time to weed eat the edges instead of mowing all the grass, it really does put a nice frame around it. I'm friends with a city council person in Johnson County in Roland Park, and she says she was in my district touring, looking at some of the new curb and sidewalk, and some of the homes in my district have challenges. And she said it is true. She's an artist by nature, and she said you can put a frame around almost anything and it looks pretty good, which is true. I don't know if it's just anything any details that you pay attention to, stuff like that makes it a better situation, and it doesn't cost as much. And if there's staff here that want to see what I'm talking about, we have some great examples of that.
Commissioner, I would also like to talk about that. Part of our program is looking at a tiered mowing program. Thus far this year, the push was to stand up more intensive mowing. They know from my end that I'm still looking at a tiered program. One of the things that we ran into is we do have to come and change some code to allow us to do exactly what you're talking about.
Great.
I don't know that anybody else in Johnson County changed those codes, because I can tell you they're the exact same here as they were there. So we may be being too strict of constructionists, but we felt like if we were going to do that, especially in some of our formerly residential neighborhoods that are still zoned residential, that we really needed to kind of look at that through the code perspective. But it's my goal with our SOAR program that we actually have that tiered system. I've highlighted some of those to staff. Staff sitting here, they knew I was going to jump in and talk about this because we've been trying to figure out how to make this happen. And some amount of that is that we need our system in Public Works to help us help parks make those decisions and then figure out how to bid that out. So our scale and scope is so much different than Johnson County that it's taking us a little bit longer to get your hands on it, but I totally agree with what you're talking about because you can frame that, and especially where we have vast tracks, get it back 8 foot off the curb, make the curb look good, and let the rest of her go to sunflowers.
And Mayor, I was going to say earlier, but we moved on, and that's great, and I think we're headed in the right direction, but I tend to err on your side in regard to the financing to get those structures down. Now, I'm kind of undecided here, and I'll tell you why, because just getting them down and financing to do that is, I'm not sure I'm completely into that. What I would need to see from staff is a strategy. It needs to be very strategic in what we take down. Those areas that have the highest marketability should be first, not the only, but first, in my opinion, so that we can, as we've talked about before, grow our community and get new homes built on those available lots. So I'm a little more of a risk taker, and I think that that I would not necessarily be opposed to financing that if it was done strategically. I just wanted to let you know.
No, I get that. Thank you. All right.
Continuing on, the next thing we wanted to highlight was our continued effort in our safe routes to schools. As I think most every commissioner in here has been touched by this program at one point in time with one school or another. Some of the newer ones we've done, I can't think of the name, Commissioner Philbrook, though. Yeah, Hazel Grove, that's it, sorry. We realized the accomplishment that served, but also some of the complexities that were specific to that location. We're looking at similar things all over the place.
And I would say that I really do appreciate the conversation with the folks that live around that school, because it made a big difference in what that final outcome was. It didn't end up looking like what we were thinking we were going to do. And by the time we got through looking, it ended up being, actually, I think you guys managed to come up with some more money through some grants to accomplish a little bit more in that particular. It just came forward at that time, and it really is nice. Thank you very much.
That's one of the big pieces, is the community outreach that's involved with that particular program. Finding those neighborhood groups that are passionate about getting their children to walk to school, finding those desired routes is the big piece. We don't just want to put them on every collector. We don't want to just put them where we think it'd be the best. We want to make sure the citizens and the residents are happy with how it goes for their area as well.
I want to put them on every collector.
I would love to have
Eventually.
sidewalks on every collector as well, but we'll get
Just
there.
saying. Okay.
The 50/50 Curb and Sidewalk Initiative program is one that's been around for quite a while. We're looking at revamping that in a few new ways, getting some more community outreach to that, letting people know what's really out there and seeing the real need that people want, possibly, and upping some of the rates of that as well. We realize some of the payout rates are a little outdated, so trying to get some people some more incentive to be a part of that. And then, as I've mentioned several times, is the repurposing of our street division personnel, getting them more specifically trained in sidewalk and curb concrete work, and getting those used in a more citywide aspect as opposed to just individual districts that they're currently situated in right now.
Okay. That concludes the street and sidewalk portion. Commissioner McKiernan, did that address your hopes and dreams for this dialogue?
Well, there's not nearly enough money for the sidewalk gap program, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Actually, we should mark this down. This is 2 times in 2 meetings where I'm going to say I completely agree. Commissioner Murguia just went back to the financing of the demolition, and I have to say she's absolutely right. If we have, I would support that financing and the debt, the cost of that debt, as long as we have a strategic plan that will ensure that we stem the tide, that we don't just keep adding structures on there after spending this big bolus of money, and then we keep coming back every year with what we've always been spending. So I do completely agree with that.
Thank you. All right, next topic.
All right, this one is not one where we really have a presentation to it, so I'll just speak to the point. Kaw River Levee is a future project for our community that we need to address. It is one where the Army Corps of Engineers has gone and taken a look at the levee. They've come back with a number that is in excess of $500 million, a requirement that states that it needs to be raised several feet.
Raised up, not raised down.
Correct.
R-A-I-S.
Yeah.
So it's one of these where we need to, they've also allocated money from a federal perspective. They're looking back to us and their shared parties. It's not just a Kansas City, Kansas issue. It also is one that we have with Kansas City, Missouri. The West Bottoms area is all impacted by this. If there's a breach of that levee, it floods off both sides. Yeah, the East Bottoms.
Thank you
Our
very
East
much.
Bottoms, but what they call their West Bottoms area. So it's one where we're looking at. So right now, we're in a point, and this budget allocates money, as we went through in our project area, to study options for cost, starting that process next year and into 19, where we'd be able to fund that. Obviously, the railroad's should be a big party to this, so we will be bringing back this more in the fall for longer discussions with the commission to let you know this is what options are being studied, what the timing will go through that process, and then potential ways that, I mean, it'll be ongoing future years. Probably the closest parallel I can think of that to this project is one that was Turkey Creek, which went on for a number of years. We saw it in the budget for a number of years, but as those of us that were around this table before or around the community before knew the disastrous flood elements we had in that area before it was fixed, now see that area and also downriver into KCMO that has been fixed from what was a huge project that was funded over many years. And that's the way this.
What was the total cost of that Turkey Creek project?
$150 million.
In fact, this one, the local share is $150 million. I'm not sure if that was the total Turkey Creek project.
That was the total Turkey Creek project. I think our share was like 16 million.
Yeah, and the local share on this one's $150 million. And the Turkey Creek
share with
project
Kansas
was,
City, Missouri.
yeah,
And any
well,
other
it's with
shareholder we can put in the mix.
anybody that we can find to help pay.
And I'll just state my expectation, any money we put into levees is going to include hike and bike on the new levee trails at the top of these levees. Just say that's something I'm going to push for.
So right now, this evening, I didn't want to set out a lot more than that. If you have more questions, Melissa's been working this with Public Works team, and we'll continue to look at that. But it is one where we tend to bring back, give more information, do more specific presentation. But studying the options is a funded portion that we start to look at now, and we'll be discussing that with KCMO.
Is there normally a state?
Microphone, please.
Is there normally a state put in on this too, as well as Fed or not? Just curious.
I don't know if there's something normal about funding of the levies. Do you guys?
Is there anything normal about it?
No, it's,
Okay.
You
it's
know,
primarily federal and then local match from.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
That's
All
all
right.
I have on that one, Mayor.
Thank you. Next topic.
Fairfax funding. This was an initiative set out. I will show, I guess there's a next slide on this one. This is one requested by Commissioner Townsend, so we just wanted to give what we have information on it and then set it up for her. But we have $100,000 that's in the budget document in this year. Next year shows $200,000. However, there's a caveat to that. It's the $100,000 of debt funding like we've committed to do in multiple years. And then we put forth the $100,000 from the TDD. The TDD was directly related to the North Point project that was done on the old racer site beside the General Motors plant in the Fairfax area. So as those projects build, they were going to, part of their incentive structure required that they had a TDD back on their property, and then they would pay it back into the whole district. So as that built up, we haven't built up to a level. It doesn't appear that there'll be $100,000 available in 2018 yet. But if we don't build in the amount of money, and it did get there, we couldn't spend the amount of money. So it's more, I think this year there's, Kathleen, I think between the years we have about $15,000 or $20,000 that's built up in this fund. 30, all right, so it's starting to build up. So throughout the year, next year, it might start to get close to that. So that's the positioning, what we had as far as the TDD. Next slide on this, guys, I think shows what projects you've planned for that area. Why don't you quickly go over that, and then we can let the commissioner speak about this.
We've been working with the Fairfax Industrial Association. The board down there has indicated several key projects they'd like us to address. In 2016, we started the design portion of this northern portion right here of Funston Road Fiberglass Road from Funston to the railroad tracks up here. That's going to be a mainly curb and gutter project to hopefully eliminate or fix some potential drainage issues that they have with the people that park along this west side of the road. That'll include some mill and overlay to try and get the road to drain positively as well. And the same kind of thing moving on to the 2017 project, which is this much larger southern portion, curb, sidewalk, and some drainage control on the west side as well. We're also trying to work with the property owner right there who currently has a very large gravel area that looked like it could be used for parking, but is currently unused. We're trying to get that reconverted back to some green space to try and eliminate some of the water issues that they're currently having. And as far as the 2018 project is concerned, most of the funds have not been yet dedicated to a project. We're working with the Fairfax board, as I mentioned, to try and figure out what they would like to see going on. They have mentioned, as mentioned on the previous slide, that they would like to see some curb and sidewalk work done along Fairfax itself when the funds become available. We're hoping to get them into the same kind of mindset that we have as developing a true 5-year CIP. That way we can really plan this out and get the best bang for our buck when we bid these projects out and design them.
All right. Commissioner Townsend, you had requested this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, let me start with the TDD fund. If we got 30,000 in there now, is there a rate at which we might know how long it would take to even accumulate $100,000? Is there any way you can systematically? Because the bottom line, what Fairfax was wanting was additional monies. They had come to the commission when we started last year's public hearing, looking at the additional funds from the Star Bond payoff to add to the $100,000 that's in the CMIP. So I was under the impression that this was coming from, these additional funds were coming from another source. But if we're waiting for this additional money to come through the buildup of the district, I was wondering at what pace might we tell them that it's going to take to reach an additional $100,000 even? That would be question number one.
I believe that the build out of all the buildings they have on the site, we might not get there with they have an 830,000 square foot building, if I recall, on the site. And there's another one that's, I don't remember the size of it. You may know, 100? No, I think it's only like 30,000. So there is some vacant space. So I believe that the $100,000 comes at a projection if they have all their still open space, so there's stuff that's undefined. But I'm gonna probably go with this to give you a better answer. Based on what's under construction today, when it goes fully onto the tax rolls, along with what they have now, I think we'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 90,000. But Kathleen, I'm going to ask you to look at those numbers based on the TDD, unless you know that, and we can come back and give you that report specifically. Because I wanted to say the $100,000 mark is based on getting everything online and going.
Okay.
So we're going to be really close.
Thank you, because I envision that would be the question they would have for me. At what time do we see that fund accumulating $100,000?
And I think the reason we won't see the big ad for 2018 is tax dollars, even TDDs, kind of flow in a year behind. You know, as we went through discussion on our property tax rates, you establish it, charge it, you collect it, and then you have it available to expend.
Doug, our commercial, sorry, I was just on your question, Commissioner Townsend. I was wondering if commercial areas were eligible for the 50/50 curb and sidewalk program. And then what's that district you can form? Again, what's benefit district? Yeah, are commercial areas eligible to form a benefit district?
Okay, I'll let you guys, are commercial eligible under our 50/50 program?
It's really on a case-by-case basis. It isn't one that we've outlined to say no, it's not, or yes, it is. If they're completing a section of sidewalk or something like that, or curbs that needs to be replaced, we've typically gone ahead and approved it as long as they follow the normal policies. However, in the areas of Fairfax, there are several areas that are parking stalls or parking areas that people say as a walking path, and currently the program is not outlined to pay for those.
And then the second part of your question is, yes, commercial areas are certainly as ill as any, they can establish a benefit district.
So I just asked the question, it's not my district, but I ask it to Commissioner Townsend's interest and to explore that option with the Fairfax Industrial Association, because a benefit district is really a unique tool that we have that you can get a lot of bang at one time.
Okay.
Commissioner Kane, were you going to jump in on the same topic?
Yes. You know, we ask our folks to pay 50/50 if they want to do theirs.
Yeah, that's
There's
right.
no reason why we shouldn't ask the businesses to do the exact same thing.
Okay, thank you.
We do for commercial businesses, for commercial sidewalks and things like that. We don't dedicate anything to an industrial area. But if it was a true sidewalk or curb issue, we would still gladly include them in the program.
Commissioner Townsend?
Well, it seems like there have been a lot of options, you know, they just want it done, so thank you. We can explore that. Mayor?
You know, I'm going to toss in my view as well on Fairfax, that it is ironic that they're wanting more curb and sidewalk. So, and one of their justifications is so their employees can get out and walk. There are 5 miles of built trail right now on the levee that are finished and complete and ready to walk on, that they don't allow their own employees to walk on, much less the general public. And this is the only levee in the region that does not allow hike and bike from Manhattan, Topeka, Lawrence, Parkville, Riverside, Kansas City, Missouri. This is the only area that does not allow hike and bike. So one of the things I'm very interested in as we partner with Fairfax, we've been working on this for a long time, is to get that levee trail open for hike and bike for the public and for the Fairfax employees. I think that would be a great way at no cost. All you have to do is unchain the gate and they have 5 miles of walking trail. I think that'd be a great place to start. Commissioner, we talk about this all the time, so I know.
I knew you were going to get the sales pitch, and I appreciate that. As someone who's had, let's say, how will I say this, joint challenge situations before, what they're talking about, though, is level surface that they can go and walk around their places of business. So that might be a bit far and a bit out of the way for a half-hour lunch break for them. But I get your point. I get your point. So thank you. The other question I had was about, with the projects that we've got there, are we spending $100,000 a pop with all that? Okay. Oh my gosh.
The way we've structured these in the past few years since we've had these funding sources available to us is we'll spend $50,000 from one year and design a project, or up to $50,000 to design a project that we could actually do and construct for $150,000, which would use the remaining $50,000 from that first year and the full $100,000 from the next year. You get much more bang for your buck if you can do a $150,000 project than a $100,000 project and try and pay for design out of that as well. Okay. And we've made Fairfax aware that they're okay, and they're okay with that.
Okay. So the to-do plan then is further discussion with that group about the benefit district, in addition to watching that TDD grow, hopefully as fast as possible. And again, number 2 area in terms of taxes into the city. And we talked about, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, a use that, the commission did not believe fit in, but as I think about living down there, maybe we can get some millennials, maybe we could see that as an entertainment district. Commissioner Walker has mentioned in the past something in the Bottoms, but, here's another gateway to our city that at night might take on a different look. Lofts, residences, or entertainment arts be the new crossroads. So this would certainly be in line with sidewalk improvement and what we could do. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bach.
All right, our next item on tonight's agenda is a discussion regarding the Parks Master Plan funding and implementation, and we had a couple of commissioners that also had some specific questions about funding for a few areas. So I'm going to start tonight with a short presentation for Mr. Connor and Mr. Rogers, and they're going to go through this, talk about what we have in place, and then go from there.
So, Mayor, before we move on to parks, I just wanted to say, I've been wanting to say this for a long time. All of our departments do a good job. I just have seen a massive improvement in Public Works and how it operates. I think, Jeff, you have an incredible staff. They're very responsive. You do a fantastic job. I was just making a joke with Commissioner Markley and I don't believe I've ever heard you speak. Ever, once. And I just want to say you've done a fantastic job. You've really ramped that department up. Your staff are so professional always and so responsive. It's just been incredible improvement since you've taken over, and I really appreciate that.
Good, thank you.
Can I jump on that bandwagon for a second?
Commissioner Markley.
You got 2 words.
There you go. I heard you finally.
I'll just jump on that bandwagon to say there's a couple of things that I've harped on during my time up here. One of those is obviously blight related, but one that I've harped on maybe more privately is just the hope that at the UG we could see a change in culture where employees feel more empowered to come forward with ideas and to be innovative in their jobs. And we have heard tonight and are still going to hear from some amazing new employees who are doing great things for our departments, but also from some amazing long-standing employees who I think have been given new opportunities under those new leadership positions. So congratulations, Doug, for hiring great people, and congratulations to all of you for doing a great job and really bringing forward ideas that we'd been hoping to see for a long time and that maybe just hadn't come to the surface in the past. So thanks.
Well, we appreciate those comments, and we will keep striving to improve. Joe?
Thanks, Doug. Mayor, Commissioners, first thing we wanted to talk about is on the master plan funding implementation. And as we've told you a few times now in the budget proposal, and as we were developing it, we weren't including any really new funds for park plan for implementation. So we just kind of want to go through kind of where we're at this year. So the first couple items up there are what we're doing with restroom upgrades and also some shelter improvements. So for 2018, there's $90,000 for restroom upgrades and $25,000 for shelter improvements. Those are not new numbers. Those are numbers that have been in there kind of year over year for general maintenance, but they do direct relately or to the master plan itself, because these are things that were specifically called out for facility improvements. So I just wanted to point out that those are in there, and we will be continuing to work on those. And it's, if you want to see, it's on page 401 of the budget. The other thing that was mentioned was funding for community center upgrades and kind of a year over year. Can we start to pick off those facilities? And again, the master plan calls that out specifically. And I wanted to talk about the Argentine Community Center project, which while there was $350,000 kind of budget, it was late in the session, and we changed the budget at the end to make that work. The total project came in at almost $460,000. And also going into that budget, I wanted to point out there was $72,000 of grant money that was made available. Thank you, Commissioner McGee. So it wasn't all of a general fund project. It was more than that, and that's how we got to the $460,000. Just want to kind of point that out, that's kind of how we got there. Just as an FYI, we should be having a ribbon cutting next month working with the operator. He's getting the facility ready to go, and he wants to work out the kinks, and we'll be getting you some information on that shortly. We need, Commissioner McGee's calendar as well.
Yeah, so I just want to comment, since you're on the Argentine Community Center, make an announcement to my fellow commissioners. I really appreciate you taking on this new idea and funding it. I think it's going to be wildly successful, and I have some good news for all of you. In addition to the $70,000+ that ONDA was able to donate to this project, I just got 2 or 3 weeks ago an additional $200,000 to build a new kitchen and extend the conference room area that I'll be turning over to the city. So I know, Mayor, you've talked about this before. So based on the money given from the government and based on the money raised, that's a 1-to-1 match. And that doesn't happen very often for any of you that know anything about philanthropy or raising money. That's pretty incredible leverage. I think that's good use of our money. Thank you again very much.
Okay. So next on our list is a little talk about recreation fields that we have now. And I'd like to have Jeremy Rogers kind of walk through kind of our inventory of ball fields and kind of how we're managing things today.
Thank you, Commissioners. As you can see here, we have 19 total ball fields. That's for youth baseball. That's for adult baseball now. We just added that at Eisenhower. And we have youth softball and youth softball and adult softball. So those are the fields there. And we have 17 total soccer fields. Most of those are practice fields, green spaces where we have put soccer goals and count that as a field. So we have 17 total soccer fields. 4 of them are game field only. Our reservation policy, we start January 1. Usually our season kind of goes from March 1st until July 31st. That's our heavy reservation time. There will be some rogue teams that come in before then to reserve fields, and that's why we put January 1. As you can see, the numbers, our baseball fields, our usage is down this year. Only 69, almost 70% of our fields are being used this year. Baseball has seen a decline here in Kansas City, Kansas. It's just the nature of the beast. The Royals aren't doing as good. When the Royals are doing good, our baseball numbers increase. When they're bad, our numbers decrease. Sporting KC is doing better. It's definitely a trend. So 83% of our soccer fields are being used. And to schedule those, the fields are scheduled in our office. They're at the Fleet Center. We schedule our in-house leagues for our youth soccer, our adult soccer, our youth baseball, and our adult softball leagues. We divvy those fields out so that our in-house teams, for baseball, we do T-ball and machine pitch. That's all we do. So we schedule those first, and then we open them up to our partners. Our partners are the KCK RBI League, the KCK Baseball Association, the School District 500, Piper Soccer Club, and KC Crew. And then once all those fields are divvied up, then we open it up to the general public.
I have a question about the numbers up there. We have about the same number of baseball fields as soccer fields. We have 5 times the number of days used on our baseball fields. That only adds up to 70%, but a fifth of the number of days for soccer fields, it adds up to 83%. I don't understand that. Maybe I don't need to understand it tonight, but maybe you can review that and come back to us.
I will. I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Maybe there's 1,000 missing in front of the 255.
There is.
Okay.
I apologize.
Let me ask, when it says one game field?
Can you turn your microphone on, please, sir?
When it says one game field, we only have one field that is suitable for actually playing games on?
The game field that we're referring to is Eisenhower, the main high school field at Eisenhower. We don't allow practices on that field. All the other fields, we use them for games,
Okay.
City Park and whatnot, but we also use those for practices. Eisenhower, Maine is game only.
I asked somebody recently, and I don't know if I got an answer or if I've just forgotten it. What's going on with Highland?
That's not their field.
I know it's Turner Rec, but what, do you know why those fields are not being used?
That I do not know.
Why did we give them that if they're not using it?
We could talk
Okay. Well, there's 3 fields there that sit vacant. I mean, pickup games. You occasionally see a handful of kids playing on them, but I'm sure they're not authorized to do it.
I think that's one of those partnership things we need to review. If you're going to go back to
Yeah,
what the
I
master
think
plan's
so.
talking about, we need partners to make things work, to get kids and adults into the recreation programs. And so it's probably just time to talk to the Turner Recreation Commission and figure out what they'd like to do with those fields, or they want to give them back, or we don't know, we'll just have to have that conversation with them.
Well, was there not a newspaper article or a news story this year about the shortage of baseball fields that are available? Are we experiencing that? Or is that just metropolitan-wide?
I think that's more of a metropolitan-wide thing. We are blessed here to have the number of fields we do. You can never have too many fields, but we served our community well this year.
Okay, well,
Okay. Just a little bit
Thank
more.
you.
Thank you. Just a little bit more about the recreation fields. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, going back to the reservations, once we've divvied up to our partners, ourselves and our partners, it's first come, first served basis. Fields are $2 for a 90-minute time slot, $50 for a whole day rentals. Usually that's for tournaments and whatnot. And if they want to use the lights, it's an extra $35. Tournament field access, the youth teams receive 2 fields for.
Make sure this is the
Oh,
new sporting fields.
Right. The tournament field access are the new sporting fields, the new turf fields out off of Parallel. And so we'll receive 2 fields for 2 weekday evenings so that for our spring, summer, and fall season so that our youth can enjoy those fields as well. So we're partnering with Sporting KC to use that facility. We are also currently using it for our adult league. They're already using it. They absolutely love it. It's very high praise, and we're very blessed to have that.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention that, sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
The tournament fields, which is the ones that Sporting has built, or
Yeah, just off of 90th and Parallel.
those are not part of the 17 that we consider our inventory, 2 separate things.
Right, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And I think there's been some question about, how can club teams access these fields? One of the things that we did when we negotiated our contract is we had every intention of putting the Parks and Rec kids on those fields whenever we could. So Sporting's our management partner. They made the agreement with us to provide this kind of access. Like Jeremy said, the adult teams are playing now. The spring of 18 is when the youth will get that schedule. So it won't start till next year. But if you're a club soccer team, there's a published rate, and I've got the rate here. It's $145 an hour for just a general public usage. But they do have a sporting club network that any of these clubs can join. It takes a little bit of effort to get into that, but it's free, and it'll provide you with a $10 an hour discount. And they also have arrangements with 3 affiliate members. These are large kind of soccer organizations, and if you're one of those clubs, the fee goes down to $115 an hour. So there are ways for the local clubs that want to get access to those fields can actually get on there with a discount.
One of the things that I think this is underway in Parks and Rec, is a review of all of our fees for our buildings and for our fields. I really want to emphasize a sliding scale. And I think for every league should turn over confidentially the addresses of the kids in their league. And if there's 0% Wyandotte County, then they should pay as though the field were lined with gold. If they're 25% Wyandotte County kids, then they should pay this rate. If they're 50% Wyandotte County kids, then they should pay a lower rate. If they're 75% or more Wyandotte County kids, I think they should have the most discounted rate. So I'd really like to see, even on first come, first serve, I think $2 for a 90-minute time slot would be great for some of our local folks to pay. But if you don't have, if you're just out of fields in Johnson County and you need a place to play, or you're out of fields north of the river and you just need a place to play and you're going to come down here, you should be paying $50 an hour like you would pay anywhere else. I mean, if Sporting's fields are $100, $150 an hour to use those, I think those fields should have a significant discount based on the percentage of Wyandotte County kids playing on them. So, you know, if our rec league gets to play on those for free because it's 100% Wyandotte County kids, I think other leagues that are that high a percentage, 75% or higher, should get a significant discount as well. So I just want to have a complete review, and I think that's coming pretty soon. I know that's underway, but I'd like to have a significant sliding scale based on a demonstration of where the people, because if you have an adult league, a softball league, and 75% of your adults are in Wyandotte County taxpayers, they should get a deeply discounted rate. If 75% of your adults live somewhere else and you can afford to drive here, you can afford to pay. And I think that's a funding source that we're missing out on here, that we should charge proportional to the users. So I'll just throw that out.
Thank you, Mayor. We have retained a consultant, and they're finalizing their research and analysis of the Parks and Recreation Department to determine the total costs, and they're going to come back and provide us with some recommendations on fees for all of their programs, including the soccer fields.
Great. Okay. All right. Does that conclude your portion of the presentation?
It does.
Commissioner McKiernan and Commissioner Kane had requested these two items. Commissioner McKiernan.
Well, originally, it was at the very, very beginning of the budget process this year, and I had said that I thought we ought to use the investment we made, the very good investment we made in Argentine, as a template to start systematically improving our community centers, investing in all of them. Now, since the time I originally said that, we've had the Parks Master Plan presented to us, and I think what we have now is the Parks Master Plan could really serve as the template for developing a strategy for strategically targeting and strategically spending. So really, I think in light of the fact that the master plan has now been presented to us and it serves as the planning tool for going forward, then I think my concern really is going to be addressed in that we will begin systematically investing not only in our community centers, but in all of our park facilities as well. So I think I'm okay on that for now.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane.
First of all, Mayor, it's July 13, 2017, and you and I agree on charging the folks from out of Wyandotte County. Write it down. Write down the time.
Write it down. What time is it? 7:19.
Melissa and I met with football folks Sunday, soccer folks Sunday. So, Joe, we need to meet with you and the coaches to talk about the use of the soccer fields out there and why they may or may not be able to use them. And then the lakeside ball fields, I actually got some information from Joe today, sent it to a contractor, and I'm trying to ask him if he would grade that area down there. And I haven't got a feedback yet. If he says no, I'm going to go to somebody else until maybe we find somebody. But what I'd really like to do is, since there is nothing west of 435, I'd like to set aside $100,000 to $150,000. So when we find the appropriate property, that we have the money set aside to build what we really want to build. And if you look out there, there's nothing. And they're willing, you know, the teams we talked to the other day said, you grade it and we'll cut the grass. And if that's what it takes, that's fine. But we are not blessed west of 435. We have nothing except Waco, and you can't play soccer on all those fields. But believe it or not, you're talking about 300 or 400 people, at least 300 or 400, that are saying, hey, we want this. And I think it's important that we set this aside, because if we don't set it aside, and when we do find the property that we're going to do something on, we won't have any money, so we'll have to wait a couple more years.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. This is an important item for the folks in Piper, I think particularly the soccer and football kids out there. I cannot remember the size and acreage of this property that we've been talking about now for a couple of months, but 2 requests on my part. Could we have a commitment from staff to try to get a handle before the end of the year on what would the costs look like for getting it ready for even soccer kids to practice on it? That's kind of request number 1. And also, part of what we talked about when we met with the community members was, what's the legal status of them just having the property? And I know it's remediated floodplain or whatever you call it, but it's a property that we can't build on, that we were forced to buy, and I don't know anything about the legal restrictions on what we can do with it, whether we can deed it to someone else. But I would like kind of those 2 things to be, obviously I'd like to know the legal status piece sooner than later, but I'd like to get a sense of the overall cost. When we first started talking about this, our notion was that possibly something could be done relatively inexpensively as it pertains to parks. Or frankly, any project we take on here. I'd really like to know, to our best ability, what are we talking about by way of cost of making this into something that could be used. So, thank you.
Do we know the legal status?
Yeah, so to answer your second question first, the property that's been deeded over to us, we have to maintain ownership.
Okay.
So we can't give it to anybody else, but leasing could be an option if we wanted to do that. And I think, Angie, if you want to talk to any more of the details about the restrictions.
Yes, it's a highly restricted use, but a soccer field would fit in to that use. It's they want open space. The one improvement you can make to the area is restrooms, and that's about it. There couldn't be a concession stand, paved parking, but you could have restrooms.
Clarify, so there are no other improvements that could occur on the, other than
you could do grading and that, but you can't do
buildings.
There might be some room for buildings without, on stilts with just like a shelter without walls.
What about stands?
It would probably depend on if they were permanent, if they, if you drilled them down, but if they were just a temporary, if they didn't have footings.
So you'll have to use the microphone, sir.
I believe what he wants to say, because we got into this issue quite a bit when we were looking at the last project out there. Everything that you put in there outside of restrooms has to be mobile. So you got it on wheels or be able to demonstrate that you can move it out of there in pretty short order.
Right. Commissioner Kane?
We rented it out to another person, and they put permanent structures in there, and FEMA kicked them off. But that property is pretty large. I don't know why, if we didn't go up the hill to the west a little bit, we couldn't build some sort of shelter. I don't know if it's on stilts or not, but something. And I also think that there's big enough room to make a walking trail to go around it. This is a lot bigger property than just a little bit.
Well, I guess you're in.
What'd you say?
I said, I guess the mayor's in now that there's walking trails.
Well, it's not on a levee, and I'm really partial to walking trails on levees. Now, if it floods, it would look like a levee trail. I do think that we have this master plan. I'd like to see some money in this year's budget, not 2018, but this year's budget, amended, that would allow us to do the kind of study to see what it's going to take to develop it and to develop it right. We do need parks out west. There's no question. We're overdue in that area. The Parks Master Plan lists that as one of the priorities, is getting parks out west. And I would like to see how we can get this done. And I'd like to study not just, we've got to come up with a funding mechanism for our park master plan. We have an amazing master plan that I think, Mr. Rogers, you suggested had lots of millions of dollars worth of need that turns out we don't have. We don't have it for our parks. We don't have it for our community centers. So what I'd like to see is some money in this year's budget that we can evaluate our community centers and see what they're going to take, and evaluate our parks and our fields to look at our field inventory and the locations of them and the usability of them, that we can go into our fall retreat as a commission, look at the layout, because our Parks Master Plan identifies the needs, but it's not at the granular level of what we're talking about to fund it. So if we can get information on our community centers and on our fields and these park issues and use this year to do it, we can go into our fall retreat and talk about how we're going to, one, find a revenue stream for it. And I do think there is grant and philanthropic money that Commissioner Murguia has talked about to do it. But we need to know the cost so that we can prioritize them and then come up with a plan. But we're going to have to come up with a funding stream. We don't have a funding stream right now, and it's going to take us outside of this budget session, the commission sitting around figuring out how we're going to fund that. So I would like to see some money in this year's budget to identify how we're going to do this, because I'd say it's pretty urgent. Commissioner Bynum.
So I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding you. Money in the 17 budget to identify upgrades that are needed across the board for a lot of the items we're talking about, but can it include identifying costs for this particular piece of property? I mean, if we're going to allocate that, can it be also for this unique, unusual piece of property?
Perhaps. My question is, what did it take when we did the one field at 9th and Parallel, 10th and Parallel?
The football field.
That one football field. What did we spend on that football field?
That was about a $200,000 build, and that was on a site that didn't require a lot of prep work or extra effort. It was kind of already being used as a practice field of some kind, and so the costs were minimal. So I would say that on a site that's not as ready, of course the cost would go up.
Sure. So it was already a practice field, and to upgrade it to a tournament field, it was about $200,000.
In this particular case, yes, that was the cost. Yeah.
So we need some idea about what it would cost. Commissioner Kane?
When y'all got parks, I have Wyandotte County Park, but I don't have nothing west of 435. And the T-Bones money, I don't know how much money that ever made it to District 5, but I bet it wasn't as much to District 5 than the rest of you received. So if we're going to do a study, I think I would like the first place to be a study is the study where I'm talking about. You come back with a cost, I can go to the folks I've already talked to and say, here's how much they say, how much would you do it for?
Yeah.
I'm trying to help, and I don't want to delay this any longer, especially why I got it on the hook now.
Commissioner Murguia?
Thanks. Mayor, so I have an idea. I don't know if it will work or not. We talked early on, first meeting, about, hey, we need to grow the community. We don't have enough money to spend on things. Is it legal, acceptable? Have we ever done this? Could we put out an RFP for one of our parks, for park development, for people to come in and propose improvements and then actually use the money for the proposal? Do you see what I'm saying? See, when we do a study, must be very out of the box given people's expressions.
Or I just didn't understand what you said.
Okay, so when we do a study, we pay someone to come in and do a study. We pay them money. Do you get it, what I'm saying?
Yes.
So let's not pay anyone, and let's take the money you're talking about, and let's put it out for RFP to say, like we would an economic development deal, and say, in that way, we won't have to pay, and then whoever comes back with the best plan, and then Commissioner Kane or staff can take it to the community, the plans, and say, okay, let's vote on these. What do you guys think? And then we can pay the person that responds to the RFP to actually do the work.
I think what she's referring to is what I would classify as more of a design build, which we do for buildings. We don't do it for conceptual things where we don't know what we want to do there. But
we just did
it would
that.
be the same philosophy for that. I mean,
I don't know why we couldn't do it once and see how it works out.
The idea is to spend, instead of spending the money on the study, you spend the money on the park.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By making somebody else design it instead of us paying to design it.
Good idea.
Okay. We have two people in queue. We have Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Bynum.
I don't want to interrupt that conversation, but
Is your microphone on, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it on? I don't want to interrupt that conversation, but I do need to make sure I put a plug in for the newly renamed Beatrice L. Lee Center that's going to be opening or rededicated on the 30th. The date's already on the calendar, I believe, of September. And so we want to make sure that that facility, since we're talking about parks, is at least on the have some short-term funding for, not upgrades, but we need to make sure it's cleaned up, bridges patched up, repainted. There's some graffiti on the side of the building that needs to be eliminated. And I appreciate the commission's support and the community support in renaming this center, but that date is on the calendar, and I do want to make sure that that is discussed as part of this conversation. I think we've already talked about it, Joe and Jeremy as well. But I support an overall plan in terms of improvements to all of our parks and facilities, because they're beyond what I'm talking about right now. There are so many other needs that are there, particularly, I think we've already identified restrooms with most of them, but there are certainly other plant needs within all of our facilities, both parks and recreation centers as well. So,
Commissioner, on that note, we will make sure that that building's ready to go for the renaming ceremony, and we'll make sure that it looks nice for that presentation.
Commissioner Bynum.
Thanks. On the design build concept, we would put out an RFP and say, we want your proposal for what? This piece of property or our park system?
So I'm just making this up, okay?
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but the reason I'm asking is because what I thought I heard the mayor say, and I think we agree, is that we need something across the board for the whole system. But you're suggesting a solution for this piece of property.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I mean, we do a lot of plans, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I kind of like to see something happen, So all I'm suggesting is if, in this particular case, I'm just taking one bite of the apple at a time. I'm not trying to eat the whole thing. So with this deal, all I'm suggesting is that Commissioner Kane is right. When you look at where the parks are located, they're located east of 635. There's really nothing.
East of 435.
I'm sorry, east of 435, not west of there. And we have a large tax-paying population west of 435. So just in regard to that issue, if there is some interest in seeing this park developed, I'm just suggesting, instead of spending money on having someone plan out a park, that's what I thought I heard, spending some money planning out a park in this location, I just suggested that we try putting it out for RFP, which is saying, hey, the staff could meet with Commissioner Kane, and he could bring together some community leadership and say, this is kind of what's been talked about. This is what I get called about. They could throw something together in the way of an RFP, and this is what the community's interest lies. We have plenty of surveys. that kind of tell us where the community's interest is. They put out and say, this is kind of what we're looking at. This is our overarching vision. What do you suggest for this dollar amount? And that dollar amount be the dollar amount that we were going to spend on planning, that we would just pay for planning. So then when they come in, they'd have to know that they'd have to be able to produce that park for that amount of money. It's not just a plan, it's actual action, it's actual development.
Well, I agree with that. My only issue is it would only cost X number of dollars to plan it. It would cost 10 times that to implement it.
Don't say that out loud, Mayor, because if we put we don't want to tell the person that's bidding on the RFP, I mean.
Well, if you only put $50,000 out for a plan, they're not going to come back with very much build, right? I mean, I want a park that's built out. I want something that's big.
I agree, but I think what Commissioner Kane is saying is that he's already trying, because of the high demand he has, he's trying to piecemeal something together anyway. He's already just saying, if I can find someone to grade it, I'm going to do that. So $50,000 to moving in the right direction to actually show the community we're moving and to develop some momentum. It may not be the end vision, but it's a great start on what he's trying to do.
Sure.
I guess I'm trying to get my head around the person who wins the RFP proposal gets what when they're done?
They get the job. They get the deal. If we say we're going to spend $150,000 and this is how much can you give us for this and this is our wish list.
But I guess, I'm sorry. So rather than allocate money directly to upgrading that property, we would allocate money to an RFP and let somebody else upgrade the property.
And whoever gives us the most for what we're offering, the best deal.
Okay. And that would have to be in addition to whatever we allocate for the rest of what we need. I'm just trying to track.
I mean, I think there's two paths here. One, we have major needs in all of our parks and all of our community centers. And that's one piece. The other piece is the short term of wanting to do a park in Piper. So I think it's two pieces. So I think here's what I'm going to suggest. I think we've had a good discussion about this. Let's let the staff, we've got a couple weeks left of this hearing, let's let the staff digest the conversation tonight and come back to us with a recommendation in terms of what we can do in 2017. Are people comfortable with that? Commissioner Philbrook.
So, we're always doing studies, and sometimes we use them and sometimes we don't, and thank God in the last 4 years we've put a lot of them into effect that we've, or tried to. But I guess what I'm looking at is so how much would a study be, just guessing, okay guys, how much would a study cost us to figure out what you're asking for, Mayor, for our whole system, as to what kind of money we need. You see what I'm saying? Because that's what you're asking for, right?
Yes, I think I'm asking for the staff to kind of scope that, to say, here's option A, B, and C. Here's X number of dollars if we're going to do the whole system. Here's if we just hit these priority areas based on what the study showed are the priority areas. I think I'd trust the staff to bring back that recommendation, because I'm just guessing they're going to bring back a lower dollar X opportunity in terms of what we can get done.
I just wanted to make sure where you were going, what your scope was.
I think I hopefully I'll get an option, and we'll probably not pick the highest dollar one, but we'll pick one in the middle or.
Okay, so I'm going to go on. So I'm going to finish out my thought with this, and that is that, depending on how much we're talking about spending on this, whichever one it is, option A, B, or C, how much of that money would we be taking out? Because I don't have anything to compare to. If we're putting 50,000 into toward Piper, in that project, or 150,000. We're taking part of the money that we're going to be using for a study for the overall and shifting it into a park is basically what it sounds like to me. Am I wrong? I mean, I'm just trying to understand this. Because you're talking about, taking the money and doing a design build, taking money that would normally go into a study. And so part of that money has to come from somewhere. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Mr. Bach, how would you approach this puzzle?
Is that what you're talking about?
Can I ask a clarifying question here? I don't understand what we're talking about studying. We just did a master plan. That's
Well,
the
no, they're
study,
talking about
right?
how much it costs.
The master plan kind of shows the priorities, but then, you know, how much is it going to cost to put money into the B. Lee Center? You know, what does the B. Lee Center need? It needs all kinds of ADA upgrades. It needs an elevator.
There
It needs
was no
restrooms.
part of the master plan that addressed costs. And I was under the impression when we got the presentation that we kind of had an idea of how much this was going to cost.
And our staff do a great job they already know how to figure out how much stuff costs all the time. Every department I've ever worked with knows, based on our parks master plan, how much stuff's going to cost.
That is correct. There are some costs associated with, it's a pretty broad overview of things. It didn't get down to Beatrice L. Lee Community Center needs an elevator. This elevator costs $100,000. It didn't get that deep.
Yeah.
But you could do that, right?
Right.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at, what I think we're all trying to get to is we don't need a study of the study. What we need to know is how we're going to implement it, but I don't think we need to pay another person to tell us what the study says. We just did the study. We need to know what the costs are, what our finances look like, and what we can implement in what order, right? That's what we want to know.
Yeah, I think I've got a pretty good handle on where you're after. I mean, what you're looking for is a recommendation that comes back. I mean, it's kind of like looking at that park. It's more of a, there's a few different phases. Using the term study may not be the right word here.
I mean, when we went, a study of a study seems like a little much for me.
When we went into the Argentine Rec Center, that dollar figure that Joe showed earlier, built within that was $20,000 of study, if by the word we're using.
Or
it was
design.
I think design analysis that we went to, and then we bid to that. It was money that went into the project, and then we did additional design analysis on the mechanical and everything like that. Now, we didn't do all that up front, and some of that kind of started layering into it. So we had building design that ultimately did what we wanted to accomplish as far as the size. Then we had to layer into that, and that's where some of the costs hit us with, because we didn't have all the mechanical built into that. So a good way to do that, if you're looking at the Beatrice Lee, I can't even say Beatrice Lee Center, we'd come into there and you'd want to look at not only what design changes you have in the building, but make sure we do all the mechanical and what the costs are to that. Now, you can put that out to everybody, but some of those type facilities, you're going to have a good feel for what you're wanting to do. So making sure you have a handle on it, you build the cost.
Yes.
The park project has a couple different layers. One is, if we're coming in, what do we ask? I mean, you can run grading numbers over an area and say, here it is, and we're going to go seed it. Versus if you're coming in and let's say, hey, let's go design this, where would we lay out fields, differences between grass, turf, whatever we want to put into it. If we looked at a restroom down the line, I don't know what the water is out there. What do we need to look at the water lines, pull those out? Different, you know, so there's different levels of how you break that out. So let us take a few minutes, and I appreciate that we can go away and say, here's one, this is a couple $1,000s of cost. We'll come back and give you an estimate here, or the next level is putting in $20,000 or $30,000 into something like that versus doing more of a design build.
So,
and that gives us a frame of, are we wanting to spend $400,000 out there or $150,000?
That's, the word design is really what I was talking about. I didn't mean study. I meant design. Design money for, because I do think there is, because we know built into every project is design money. And sometimes you've got to spend some money to know how to spend it, and sometimes you spend money and realize you're better off not spending money on a certain thing. So I think if we did some design work this year on the field, this particular piece of property, I want to design on our baseball fields generally, because I think there's I just want better facilities. I want better tournament facilities. I want 4 and 8 fields together where there could be a tournament held that's nice and new and what our kids deserve. That's what I mean by design work. So I would like to see some design work into 2017, because then we can take that design work, go into our fall strategy plan, and then figure out how we're going to fund it. But I think there is some preliminary design work, so that's a better word than, I don't want to study a study. Thank you for that clarification. Okay.
So I just want to add to what the mayor's saying. I think I know what you mean now. So not to add any more out-of-the-box creativity and confuse people more, but specifically as it relates to this park that Mike is talking about. It's not even my district, but so what I think could be a potential partnership there is that sometimes if you try to look at it from an overall county perspective, and you're looking at a neighborhood park, that may not be the best way to do it. So, for example, if I was Mike, what I would do in that particular district is I would have staff try to meet with the Piper School District and see if there is some cost sharing that could be done in the way of designing a park in that area, since they represent the youth in that area, and it seems like we're targeting our parks towards youth. And see if, when there's some cost sharing and maybe some design ideas that could complement the district, and maybe some long-term maintenance sharing that could help us out and also help them out. It could serve two purposes. So I'm just throwing that out there as an option.
Commissioner Bynum.
Kind of a thought with that. Back when in 2015, I think was the year that Commissioner Townsend brought to the commission that if we wanted funding for a Northeast master plan and we went out and tried to raise it, then we would have commission commitment for dollars. And I wonder if that's an approach that we could take here, along with what you describe in terms of design, and again, drilling down to a dollar amount. I just went through the whole Parks Master Plan as it was presented in hard copy, and I see dollar amounts for restrooms and picnic shelters and playgrounds, but I don't really see total costs for everything we need. So I would maintain that we do still need to know what implementation of the master plan would cost, but nonetheless, in kind of the same fashion that Commissioner Townsend did in 15 for us to get our master plan, could we say, if Commissioner Kane, and I would be more than willing to meet with anyone that you think that would be helpful, could get a commitment for, number one, us to know a dollar amount that we would be talking about, and a commitment of some philanthropic dollars or in-kind service, was, it sounds like you have, then could we commit, the commission commit, once we know those two things are in place, could the commission commit to, you know, this dollar amount that would begin to get this done? And I don't think that it really solves the Park for Piper problem.
I don't think it's the final solution.
But I
think it's an interim solution, right?
It is a thing. But I would be really interested, again, I don't know how big the acreage is. It strikes me as bigger than I think it is. And so I don't know if we're talking about the whole thing or if we can work on plans for part of it. And again, what those costs would be. Some commitments from either contractors or philanthropy to put forward some of what's needed. I mean, I'm just trying to land somewhere in the middle so that we can begin.
Yeah. Commissioner Walker and then Kane.
I like Mike's idea. I like the decisiveness of going out and acquiring the property and then worrying about what we're going to do with it and how we're going to do it.
Well, we already have it. We
do?
already own it.
Forced to buy it.
All right.
It's ours.
Well, then,
Love it.
I still like his idea.
All right. Commissioner Kane?
I haven't got these guys to commit to it yet, but you can browbeat a lot of people to do something. But I'm not going to just stop at one. I'm going to go around to several other folks to say, hey, let's do this. And they've already committed that they do the maintenance on the place, you know, cut the grass and stuff like that. So that, I mean, they'll put some sweat equity into it just as long as they have a place to go. And you're talking about, I think it's 400 and some odd kids that would use those fields. That's just and that's not even the actual high school. This is just the club teams and the Piper Optimists, which they can't talk about it until next month because they have to take a vote. But you're talking about where it would give us some relief on the other parks. That's right. You know, so there'd be more availability for the other parks. And because what's going on now, they're driving over Johnson County and paying a lot of money. So that's why, you know, I've been working on this for a heck of a long time, and I think it's time to do something.
All right, so Mr. Bach, do you feel like you have enough direction to come back to us in the next week or so?
I have some direction.
Clear as mud?
I believe we'll be able to work up some things for you.
Okay. All right,
I guess I'm just clarifying. You're not looking for me to come back with a 400,000 or 500,000. We're talking about, you know, smaller type options
No.
of funding to make these things.
Nobody's trying to boil the ocean. Can't think of a way to describe it better than that. It's just one at a
our
time.
president might be trying to boil the ocean right now, but that's a different.
You know, hey, Doug, and we don't have to bite this apple all at one time. Make one field. We'll use what we have now. When we get time, we'll make the second field. When we get time, we'll add the walking trail. I mean, we got to start somewhere. Start with one field. Maybe a year or so later, do another one. Maybe we can have fundraisers for this thing. I mean, you know, we've got to do something.
Mayor, I do have one more question. Sorry. I appreciate that. My question on back to the legality of we can't do anything, we can't give it to anybody, we can't sell it to anybody, and we can't build anything on it. Can there be water?
That's perfect.
Can there be water? I mean, we can put a restroom.
Yeah, every time it
Yes. Yes, we can run water to
I
it.
think we can, and it makes exceptions for existing utilities and easements. The federal law does.
Give it to anybody.
Can you turn your microphone on, sir?
Floodplain property.
No, I know, but we can't lease it?
No, we can lease it. No, I think.
I guess as part of the
Give a 99-year lease, you're same as selling it.
But as part of the overall design, we need to make sure what we can and can't do on this particular property, right? I mean, that's what Brent Brown was just talking about. He's going to check with FEMA folks to say what is going to be allowed for sure. Again, and that would be part of the design when we bring this forward. So if volunteers want to come out there, maybe you can't run a water line. I mean, we don't know what the answers are yet, but we just got to get this design part done.
All right.
Just that's why I was asked, that's why I was wanting to get to the.
Clear?
Yeah.
All right. That brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. You can see what are the future workshops anticipated. Next, on July 17th, next Monday, we're going to be looking at public safety, police and fire, and traffic unit, that's police. So you can see what's coming. We will have presentations on those areas scheduled for Monday. Any other comments? If you do have another topic that's occurred to you, please forward that to me, and we will work it in. We do have some slots left. We are not required to fill all of our budget slots, discussion slots, but we do have more slots available. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.